A black woman's head is forced underwater by two white cops in the blinding light of day at a neighborhood pool, while bystanders stand frozen, their silence deafening. Jasmine Holloway wasn't just struggling for breath, she was battling a system that had already branded her a threat because of her skin. No one moved. No one shouted. No one dared defy the badges that were drowning her in full view until a single voice pierced the hush. "That's Sheriff Holloway's daughter. What state do you call home? Have you witnessed moments like this where you are?" Watch until the end and drop your state in the comments. Let's uncover where justice truly stands in America. The idyllic afternoon at the neighborhood pool shattered into chaos as this act of racial hatred and police brutality unfolded against a backdrop of clear blue skies. Jasmine Holloway, her face barely skimming the water's surface, fought desperately for air, her skin gleaming under the oppressive grip of authority. Officer Brent Salter, his eyes burning with a twisted sense of power, shoved her down relentlessly, deaf to her choked pleas and the stunned gasps of onlookers circling helplessly. No one dared break the spell of fear cast by those sworn to protect. Jasmine, the daughter of a sheriff and a respected student, a community volunteer, felt terror blend with disbelief as water swallowed her cries unseen by Brant, who saw only what he chose to hate. Which city of the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you have any confrontation with the HOA. We'll narrate your story on our channel. Another faceless objection to authority in his eyes, not the sheriff's daughter, whose reputation could unravel his life's work with her mere existence. The ripples in the water mirrored the societal clash, unfolding in silent screams and guttural shouts above. The crowd, while in shock, remained spellbound, drawn into the awful theater playing out at the center of this placid pool. Brent shouted angrily, drowning degree by degree in his own misguided rage. His uniform a stark stamp of power gone very, very wrong. Should have thought twice before acting suspicious. Shouldn't you? He bellowed, his voice breaking through the stunned, murmuring like a knife, oblivious to his own vulnerability, hanging by a thread over an abyss he couldn't yet see. He thought she was just another person to be put in her place. The truth loomed closer and more dangerous than he could comprehend. The swimming pool stood still, a deceptive reflective surface masking the turmoil below. Parents clutched their children. Residents exchanged hushed, frantic whispers over the growing scene, torn between fear of what they witnessed and fear of the uniforms that lined their streets. A powerful irony clawed at their conscience, helpless observers to a blind hierarchy that now threatened one of their own, despite appearances. Amongst these hushed presences, one woman, older, eyes glimmering beneath years yet wise, wrestled with the urge to intervene. Her voice, shaky but defiant, finally pierced the tense silence with two words that would raise the foundations of justice. "That's Holloway's daughter." The name dropped like a thunderclap among the citizens, familiar with the sheriff's reputation for fairness and righteousness. The crowd stirred, mouths agape as realization dawned, each second becoming an epic, while curiosity twisted into a visceral clamor of potential injustice and alliance against Brent's unchecked fury. Faces once passive, altered by the powerful, uproar within, showing an embryonic resistance as fear wrestled morality to its knees. Their silence a complicit echo as much as a veil of protection. Brent's tightening grip lagged momentarily, an almost instinctual reflex to these turbulent words. Anger and insecurity gave way to a flicker of doubt within his eyes, realizing now whom he held beneath the water was not just anyone, but the blood of his superior, woven unbeknownst it into the fabric of his career. To some, Jasmine was a community daughter, but to him she was a threat, a potential end to his authority. Jasmine felt the loosened promise of air and clarity in those wavering seconds, her mind surging with resurgence as her body readied. Tethered fleetingly to consciousness, the muffled roars above seemed distant but purposeful. Each bubble of air a reminder that survival wasn't just personal but political. Her story now embroiled in the wider narrative of activism and change. In this defining moment, the amplify of justice, The cries of agreement and dissent circled the air with a volatile blend of astonishment and indignation. A plea, an accusation, and a call to arms laced themselves into a tapestry that neither cop nor civilian, guilty nor innocent, could unravel easily or dismiss without consequence. A power dynamic had shifted, but whether it was temporary or catalytic remained yet to unfold. As shadows of rebuke threatened to engulf Brent's looming future, tensions seeped through the once calm waters, reverberating far beyond the confines of the pool. The incident burned itself into memory, preserving a narrative of violence meant to inspire fear, but instead seeded rebellion. A turning point grappled with inevitability, leaving spectators to ponder the limits of authority when, challenged by truth, a rallying began, more resolute, watching and waiting, fate entwined within the reflection of a drowning sun against mounting darkness. Jasmine Holloway was never one to go unnoticed. Tall, poised, and always seemingly in motion, she carried herself with a blend of grace and unyielding determination. The youngest daughter of Sheriff Holloway, she'd grown up under the shadow and shelter of her father's badge, absorbing both the privileges and the burdens it brought her family. Her youthful days in Magnolia Creek were spent in the company of books, community projects, and frequent reminders from her father about the weight of justice. Yet today, as she pulled herself onto the edge of the pool, water cascading over her shoulders like a liquid shroud, those assurances felt ephemeral, a distant memory drowned out by the harsh reality of Brent Salters' unchecked rage. Her lungs burned, each ragged breath and oath against the brutal hand of prejudice that tried to silence her. "Jasmine, are you okay?" a shaky voice called out from the gathering crowd. It was Mrs. Hernandez, the kindly neighbor who knew Jasmine since she was in pigtails. Her face mirrored a mixture of concern and determination as she knelt beside Jasmine, wrapping a towel around her shaking frame. Jasmine nodded weakly, words momentarily strangled by the vacuum of her ordeal. She glanced up, meeting the eyes of the onlookers. There was anger in their gazes. Yes, but also a deep well of sympathy and realization, a collective understanding that what had unfolded was not merely personal, but a reflection of broader injustices that had simmered for too long. At that moment, Jasmine found herself caught between gratitude and a fiery urge to confront choices about how to channel the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Despite the throbbing in her body, the events pushed her thoughts into sharp focus. "It shouldn't have to be like this," she muttered more to herself than anyone else, her voice raw but resolute. In the nearby throng, whispers began to weave through the air, binding the community in a shared narrative of disbelief and quiet rebellion. "Can you believe it?" a young man murmured to his friend. "That was Holloway's kid, the sheriff's girl," another affirmed with a shake of her head. Their conversations underscoring the unexpected twist that had unraveled before their eyes. For Jasmine, awareness crept in like a dawning sun, illuminating the truths she had evaded for too long. Her father often spoke of the blue line and the community it served. But today that line had blurred impossibly close to tragedy, shrouded in the bias that had cut into her existence. Brent Salter stood a few paces away, off balance, reality pressed against his consciousness. The crowd's eyes bore into him, each glance a silent accusation steeped in the knowledge of who Jasmine was and what his actions had nearly cost him. His uniform, now a gaudy facade of authority, felt like a chain rather than a shield. Jasmine exhaled slowly, her heart beat, steadying into purpose. "I knew you saw the badge, not the person," she finally managed, looking directly into Brent's eyes. Her words sliced through the charged atmosphere with precision, cutting clearer than any evidence could in that moment. A truth he'd ignored now threatened to rewrite his fate. Or worse, Mrs. Hernandez squeezed Jasmine's hand in silent solidarity, a reminder that she wasn't alone in this fight. Around them, residents began to scribe mental notes, stitching together the memory of Brent's aggression and the injustice they had allowed to momentarily reign unchecked. Jasmine's vision sharpened, the pool sighed around her, transforming into a platform for resistance rather than defeat. Beneath the cloak of her ordeal lay a spine of steel, her resolve solidifying, unfurling the voice she'd cloak in her father's shadow for too long. Knowing the community had witnessed her in such a vulnerable state, Jasmine realized her story had taken a turn, one she had no choice but to lead. The narrative of her life intertwined with a broader movement, echoing a call for change that neither she nor her father could ignore. As the murmurs grew louder, the air laden with an insatiable need for justice, Jasmine recognized an inescapable truth. Her survival wasn't just personal, it was political, unifying, a testament to the strength found in fragility. With this newfound clarity, Jasmine's resolve crystallized. She would not fade into the background. Her voice, her name, and her struggle were now woven tightly into the town's very fabric, and she was determined that the world would hear it. Racial tension hung thick in the air, palpable and suffocating, as Jasmine returned to her feet, resolute beneath the weight of the incident that had almost silenced her for good. The very fabric of her identity was still dripping with chlorinated water and the remnants of unearned hatred. The whispers that began at poolside cascaded outwards, breaking into a torrent of speculation, judgment, and fear as news spread like wildfire through Magnolia Creek. Brent Salter, the officer whose actions had sparked the flames, found himself standing at a precarious edge, facing the reality of a town now divided by actions stained with racial bias. His motivations twisted into the public discourse, debated and dissected in hushed tones, his authority openly questioned for perhaps the first time in his career. Within the precinct, whispers turned to echoes of respect turned rancor, a brotherhood, strained by the weight of his misjudgment. For Jasmine, this incident was proof of a truth she'd silently carried. Even here in her own town, her blackness was seen first, before her name, before her history, before her very humanity. It was a revelation shared by so many before her, a painful legacy she felt deeply resonating within her bones. She returned home that evening to a house that felt unfamiliar, its walls echoing with the silent knowledge of what had transpired. Her father's absence weighed heavily, his preoccupation shielding him from this personal expectancy of injustice that had now reached his doorstep. Sheriff Holloway hadn't been in town when it happened, off dealing with another county's crisis, but it wouldn't be long until the full breadth of today's events demanded his attention in full force. Jasmine settled into the kitchen, her fingers tracing the grain of the worn wooden table, grounding herself through the heft of its permanence. Her phone buzzed incessantly, a chorus of supportive text messages from friends and family members who had caught wind of what had happened. "Stay strong," they said, a mantra swallowed by the reality of her situation. That strength was never truly optional for someone like her. In the silence of the Holloway home, Jasmine replayed the events over and over in her mind. The water, the struggle, the sharp bark of Officer Salter's voice. Each recollection threaded itself into her consciousness, anger steadily replacing the vulnerability she'd endured. She understood that this wasn't just an isolated incident, but a glaring symptom of deeper systemic issues that blemished even this ostensibly idyllic town. Hours earlier, in the moment her identity had been revealed, the police officers' eyes had widened, their faces shifting from domineering to something bordering on fear. The undisturbed abuse of power they'd exerted cracked as they realized the extent of the mistake. Jasmine now recognized this misguided fear as an opportunity. Not only her own moment, but a moral imperative to act, to rise beyond personal vindication and touch the broader canvas of justice. Across town, those once idle in their comfort now found themselves questioning, can such blatant acts be forgiven under the invisible shield of authority? Do they stand down as onlookers while someone with a badge drowns their promise of freedom? In acts of silent exoneration, a stir of local activism began to infiltrate households. A community on the verge of seeking answers, truths long suppressed by the sands of complacency. Jasmine, now reluctantly thrust into the center, felt the weight of expected leadership pressing on her psyche. Her actions in the next hours, days and weeks could define a much larger struggle than the one contained within Magnolia Creek, the phone interrupted her train of thought once more, the screen lighting up in a familiar display of her father's call. "Jasmine, are you okay?" Sheriff Holloway's voice trembled over the line, the finality of what he had yet to hear, fully settling in. "I'm okay, Dad, but it's time we talk about what's happening here," she replied, steeling herself for the conversation that awaited them both. She knew the road ahead was fraught with unpredictability. But amidst the turmoil, an ember of determination sparked within her. A relentless drive to ensure the world saw who she really was, and that her struggle was not in vain. Minutes later, as the town continued its restless stir beneath the dawning wrinkles of a new uncertain reality, Jasmine stood firm in the knowledge that change was not a distant mirage, but a seed determined to fracture the cracked pavement of prejudice. As citizens grappled with newfound awareness, Jasmine readied herself to lead them beyond the divide, the conversation she would catalyze, transforming shock and fear into unyielding resolve for justice. As dusk settled over Magnolia Creek, an unnatural stillness lingered, stretching tense and unyielding across the community like a taut string poised on the cusp of breaking. Jasmine's ordeal, silent yet roaring, had sent shock waves through the town, propelling its inhabitants into an unforeseen collision course with long-avoided truths. Word had spread rapidly, each retelling twisted and nuanced by the biases of its teller, leaving in its wake a pool of polarized perspectives on justice and authority. For those gathered at the pool that day, the burden weighed heavily. What had they truly witnessed, and more importantly, what should they do now? These questions marinated in the collective consciousness, tugging at the seams of silence that had for too long mended their community's frail unit. Among these witnesses, Reverend Thompson stood in reflection, his faith brought to a precipice by the harsh realities laid bare at the lifeguard's whistle. Known for his sermons of unity and peace, he now grappled with a knowing voice urging him to speak boldly against the injustice witnessed under the sun's scorching judgment. As he walked the worn path to his modest church at the edge of town, he felt a stirring, a sermon of defiance and truth brewing within, each word a plea for courage among his parishioners. At the Holloway residence, Jasmine's world spun on an axle of introspection and melancholy, her voice finding resonance in the quiet dialogues with her sense of duty. The phone calls and messages continued like a persistent storm, some comforting, others starkly accusatory, but each one a staccato beat of the town's divided heart. Among them were those whose silence echoed louder than any word, a vacuum pregnant with an unspoken plea, "Do the right thing." Sheriff Holloway's return late that night brought the chill of reality crashing through the door, blending the personal and professional turmoil into an inextricable knot. His rugged face, etched with lines of authority and fatigue, softened as he entered the familial space that felt for the first time foreign in its fragility. "Jasmine," he started, words halting like a faltering breath. "I've heard enough to know. I should have been here sooner. I'm sorry." His eyes met hers. A quiet storm of paternal concern and the dawning realization that those beneath his command could challenge the very values he'd instilled. "It's not you that needs to apologize," Jasmine replied, her tone steady, but tinged with the sorrow of someone who had aged a decade in a day. "It's them, Brant, the ones watching." Everyday passivity turns to compliance. Sheriff Holloway nodded, humbled by the conviction in her voice. A righteous fire he'd rarely seen fanned into such prominence. "Things will change, Jasmine, I promise." In the town, Brianna Madison sat with her daughters, young minds inched in the naivety of a world they were still learning to navigate. Brianna herself was a teacher, well versed in the language of lessons, yet here she found herself struggling to articulate the complex dance of right, wrong, and the shadowy gray that leaned uncomfortably close in times like these. Together with other parents, Brianna felt raw, her usual assurances of safety and equality challenged and transformed into a pledge of action. With voices united, they began to discuss plans not only for their children's sake, but for the dismantling of the inequality hidden behind their suburban smiles, an assembly of resolve, quietly organizing beneath the veiled prejudice of recognition. Adrift in this sea of community rebirth, Ollie Bennett, a local business owner who had long prided himself on neutrality, felt the scales tip within. The events had exposed a glaring chasm across his customer base, sharper than any division he'd witnessed, leaving him wondering, was silence still a choice, or the fig leaf of complicity? As the clouded night wore on, Jasmine gazed out into the darkness, imagining the roads of Magnolia Creek as unwritten lines in a ledger bound to contain this catharsis. Her thoughts shifted to Reverend Thompson's sermons, Brianna's classroom discussions, and her father's commitment, a community tentatively poised to write forth a narrative of justice her voice would spearhead. The phone buzzed again, and this time it was a different message, a town meeting proposed by a group of concerned citizens, prompted by Thompson's awakening and Brianna's advocacy. A forum to air grievances, seek understanding, and forge a path where silence would neither avail nor assuage. Jasmine's breath hitched, tinged with hope, her resolve solidifying into certainty. For while the pool had witnessed cruelty, it might yet become the birthplace of change. A collective voice rising from the echoes of violence promised to reshape the blueprint of their racial reality, her fight no longer hers alone. Those who witnessed, those who chose silence now faced a decision: continue as bystanders or become instruments of revival. For Jasmine and Magnolia Creek, the choice lay on the horizon, a dawn of integrity that would define them thread by thread through action's unwavering tapestry toward justice. Sheriff Holloway sat in his office, the morning sun casting a faint light across a room crowded with mementos of a career dedicated to service. Each plaque, each dusty accolade, now felt like a silent judge, questioning the integrity they once represented. The weight of his daughter's ordeal pressed heavier against his chest than the badge upon it. He knew the reckoning would reach him, too. A convergence of the personal with the professional, now inescapable. The town had erupted in discourse. The poolside atrocity, a catalyst that none could ignore. Both the news and the public called for action, and Sheriff Holloway, despite his personal entanglement, understood the necessity of an official stance on the matter. Something had to give, not merely as a matter of image or politics, but as a requisite for real change within the domain he had dutifully served. As he riffled through his drawer, he found the letters his office had amassed over the years. Complaints, requests, testimonies of overlooked misconduct. Each correspondence was a ghost whispering of past silence, begging for acknowledgement in the face of Jasmine's very tangible struggle. Soon, his offices would become the stage for a public showdown of accountability. The town hall meeting propelled by a groundswell of community activism demanding transparency and fairness. It was scheduled for later that evening, and Holloway's name was pinned to the event. His role transcended that of a mere participant. He was now a symbol, a fulcrum upon which justice would balance. Meanwhile, in a more confined room across the precinct, Brent Salter awaited an internal hearing. The blank walls around him mirrored his impending isolation. A career and freedom, perhaps hanging in the balance, rumors of his actions had cemented his notoriety, and as the slow hands of department protocol convened to assess his future, he confronted the ruin of reputation and the dark joke of his misguided power. Jasmine, despite the trauma etched into every nerve, had refused to be sidelined. Her voice, wielded against the silence of bystanders and the suffocating weight of systemic racism, had become a clarion call for the disenfranchised in Magnolia Creek. The coming meeting would not merely be an exchange. It was a theater upon which the town would grapple with its unseen shadows. By midday, the community buzzed with anticipation. Reverend Thompson fortified himself with reflection, drawing strength from scriptures, advocating for justice and the downtrodden. His commitment stirred local congregations, painting the sacred halls with dreams of empathy and equity manifested into action. Across town, Breonna Madison prepared handouts, formational flyers, and a free speech haven for the students, urging them to engage and speak up. Your voices are vital, she told them. You have the power to change the world around you. Start now. Bring whispers and sigh. The town gathered as evening approached. Stakes raised as high as the town hall's peaked roof. Neighbors once fractured found themselves side by side. The chasm of difference bridged by shared purpose. Spaces that had long separated black from white, authority from citizen, found common ground, united in a hopeful yet tense promise of collective action. Into this charged atmosphere walked Sheriff Holloway, scanning the crowd. Each face a story he'd either heard or overlooked. He stood before them, a symbol of both duty and the legacy that needed amendment, his daughter's ordeal coloring his words. Good evening. His voice pushed against the swirling buzz. Steady yet burdened. Thank you all for coming tonight. I stand here not just as your sheriff, but as a father, as a fellow member of Magnolia Creek. My daughter's experience shone a glaring light on issues we've shielded ourselves from for too long. Whispers quieted, breaths held, a collective heart beating in anticipation. Jasmine sat in the front row, resolute and unwavering, her presence an undeniable force. As we move forward, Holloway continued, I pledge that our department will undergo a thorough evaluation. Transparency will reign. Where oversight failed, I will ensure reform. Brent Salter's actions are inexcusable, and he will face the full measure of our justice system. Impartial and true, the room erupted, voices overlapping. In a blend of relief and lingering skepticism, Jasmine watched as the sheriff, her father, dared to step beyond the illusion of righteousness, catalyzing a pivotal conversation about authority and its boundaries in their community. Brent's future, now an example rather than an exception, set a precedent. Conversations that had been stifled began to breathe. Tensions echoed in the town hall that night, but so did hope. Hope for a conscience revived through the tears and voices of brave souls like Jasmine. The meeting marked a new chapter, an ancient narrative weaved anew with vibrant, restless possibility. Steps taken that evening would ripple outward, drawing the gaze of nearby towns, questioning their own shadows, their own silence. Justice began its slow, uncertain march hand in hand with Magnolia Creek's stubborn, harrowing resilience, forging pathways towards understanding and change. Officer Brent Salter sat in the dim light of a cramped interrogation room, the shadows casting harsh lines across his face, carving out every trace of the ordeal that had brought him here. His thoughts spiraled as he tried to grasp the enormity of his actions, driven by long-held prejudices and a fervent belief in authority that until now had gone unquestioned. Through the narrow pane of glass, Brent could see the faint outline of his precinct, a place once familiar, now distant and hostile. His partner, Steve Harper, occupied the seat across from him, a conflicted figure torn between camaraderie and duty. Steve's face was hard, etched with a taut line that bordered on condemnation, masking the turmoil rolling within. Brent, this doesn't look good, Steve began cautiously, breaking the silence hanging heavy between them. The words fell like stones, each syllable weighted with the inevitability of consequence. There will be hearings, internal reviews, maybe even criminal charges. You've got to give them something. Brent met Steve's gaze, a tinge of desperation slipping into his voice. I didn't mean for it to go this far, he said, though the defense sounded thin, even to his own ears. It just got out of hand. What were you thinking, Brent? Steve's voice rose in incredulity, a sharp edge cutting through the stagnant air. That was Holloway's daughter. Did you think just because she was at the pool, you could? He stopped himself, the accusation heavy enough to rest unset. Brent looked away, his mind rummaging through memories of his encounters with Jasmine's father, Sheriff Holloway, a man he respected, yet quietly resented for his progressive stance and perceived favoritism within their ranks. Until now, his actions had always skirted the boundaries, navigating prejudices held stubbornly beneath the surface, like shadows at dusk. I thought I was doing my job, Brent replied finally, his voice thin, as insubstantial and confounded as the justification stirring in his thoughts. Steve shoved his hands into his pockets as though trying to contain his own frustrations. We have a duty to protect, Brent, not to drown people trying to enjoy their afternoon. You crossed a line that day, one that no badge can shield you from. In that room, the prisms of judgment and reflection bore down on Brent, an unyielding truth he couldn't shake. For years, he'd walked the line between enforcement and harassment, believing each action was covered by the veil of duty. Now, the specter of his choices loomed large, no longer protected by institutional silence or unchallenged authority. Meanwhile, Jasmine sat in her father's office, the weight of the recent town hall reverberating through her bones. The room's normally austere atmosphere was softened by her presence, a testament to her quiet, enduring strength. The echoes of Sheriff Holloway's pledges reverberated in her mind, conjuring a fragile hope that action might follow rhetoric. "Dad," she began, her voice steady and strong. "Brent isn't the only problem. This runs deeper than one bad cop. You know as well as I do that there are others, and the system protects them." Sheriff Holloway sighed, the weight of the world seeming to anchor his shoulders. "I know, Jasmine, and now that we've brought this to light, there's no turning back. Your bravery pushed the first domino. We can't stop until they all fall." He glanced out the window, a contemplative look in his eyes. "Transparency and accountability. Those are our only paths forward. I promise you things will change." Back in the interrogation room, Brant's chance for reflection dwindled as Steve gestured toward the stack of files on the table. Complaints, disciplinary notes, a record now bare before him. As Brant's eyes scanned the pages, a mirror image of his career lay stark. Actions pieced together to form a damning mosaic, at last revealing the dangerous pattern etched in his past. Resignation extinguished Brant's resistance, even as fear clawed at the edges of his consciousness. The situation demanded a price, one he felt unprepared to pay, yet inexorable in its crawl toward justice. Steve leaned forward, the veneer of friendship now laced with professional distance. "Listen, Brent," Steve said evenly and measured. "For whatever it's worth, make the right choice now. Cooperate. This is the only way to salvage something. Anything." Inwardly, Brent's conscience balked at the finality of those words. Yet deep down, truth whispered for release, urging him to navigate the storm, not as its creator, but as one willing to yield to the oncoming tide. In the silence that followed, Brent nodded, defeated, but resolute. The first admission of guilt, paving a narrow path through the darkness. Beyond the precinct's walls, the night settled heavy with promise and uncertainty. Magnolia Creek, the wounded town, reeled under its burden, but did so with eyes wide open, a candle flickering against the enveloping night, determined to burn its path through the fog of injustice. In the aftermath of chaos, whispers of complicity wound their way through the precinct, casting a long shadow over the corridors of power. The fraternity of silence that had once protected officers like Brent Salter now revealed its mottled underbelly, a dangerous allegiance that prioritized unity over righteousness. Rumors ran rampant, seeping into quiet conversations between officers who stood at a crossroads of loyalty and justice. The walls reverberated with hushed accusations as accountability surfaced, forcing a community long enshrouded in unchecked power to question and examine its own values. Detective Sarah Green, a veteran in the force known for her steady hand and unwavering ethics, stood at her desk, an unassuming hub in the tidal wave of change. Her presence had always been a steadying force amidst turmoil, a silent guardian of morality in a room punctuated by palpable unease. Officer Tom Randall approached, the lines on his face deepening with concern. Their interactions had always been collegial, if not fiercely loyal to the badge they bore. Yet today, an unusual hesitance clouded his expression. "Sarah," he began, words careful and considered, "you've heard about Brent, right? What's brewing upstairs?" Sarah looked up from her cluttered desk, her eyes meeting Tom's briefly before returning to her paperwork. "I heard," she replied tersely, her demeanor as cool as the autumn breeze sneaking through the open window. Tom shifted his weight, the discomfort of truth palpable between them. "Some of the guys are real pissed about how this is going down. They think it's overblown, that Brent's just another scapegoat." Pause settled heavily over the room, Sarah's hands ceasing their methodical sorting of case files. She took a moment, choosing her words with the measured precision she'd become known for. "Is that so?" she replied, her tone edged with underlying resolve. "But maybe we need more accountability around here. This place could use some sunlight." In their small corner of the precinct, the unspoken rift within the department became glaringly evident, a rift dividing those willing to confront the systemic rot intertwined with their legacy and those content to watch from the sidelines, complicit in their inaction. Sarah leaned back slightly, gazing at Tom with the kind of penetrating insight only time and experience could refine. "We've got to change Tom before it changes us any further." That incident was a punch we all should have anticipated. Her words hovered between them, challenging him to rethink his stance, to view the copious boys will be boys culture through a lens clearer than camaraderie. Across town, Jasmine steeled herself for a meeting with local civil rights advocates who had congregated at the community center. The incident at the pool had unfurled complex layers of prejudice and silence within the town, but it also succeeded in galvanizing a movement, a groundswell of voices determined to prevent another such episode of silent harm. Stepping into that gathering, Jasmine was greeted with nods of empathy and encouragement, a testament to her strength amidst adversity. She realized that her struggle was now bound with a broader narrative necessitating collective action rather than isolated outrage. Among the gathering, Maya Carter, a passionate community organizer known for her unyielding dedication to justice reform, welcomed Jasmine with open arms. "Jasmine, we're glad you're here. Your story has breathed new life into this fight. We're with you every step of the way." Jasmine nodded, feeling the resolve solidify within her. "Thank you. It's not just about holding Brent accountable. We have to transform the very foundation of our system. Make sure what happened to me becomes a catalyst, not a forgotten memory." Maya smiled, an expression of both exhaustion and unflagging hope. "We plan to put pressure on the administration, demand transparent investigations into any suspected misconduct. Together, we'll build a future where justice is not selective, but universal." The meeting branched into discussions of unity, strategies for reform, and the importance of inclusive dialogue. Conversations fueled by a brewing storm of communal determination. Participants began to outline plans, strategies sharpened like arrows aimed at the heart of injustice. As the day waned and the group disbanded, Jasmine was left with a clear realization. The battle line had been drawn, not just for her personal retribution, but for the dignity of every silenced voice in the community. Back at the precinct, silence tangled into acknowledgement. Detective Sarah Green, emboldened by her own convictions, initiated steps to open the precinct books, calling for a transparency audit. Support wound its way through the ranks like a vine through trellis, weaving a tapestry of promise amidst the fractured unity. Brent Salter's actions had torn open community wounds, but they also provided a salve of realization, a shift toward a collective unburdening, an ascension to a narrative richer with justice and equity for all. And as the first steps of reform took root, magnolia trees unfurled their blossoms, a hopeful nod to the dawn of a new era, eager to break free from the shackles of secrecy. As dawn broke over Magnolia Creek, the tranquility of the morning couldn't mask the undercurrent of tension woven into the town's fabric, an inescapable reality that had hung in the air since the incident at the pool. Jasmine Holloway's near drowning had sparked a wildfire of inquiries, unearthed secrets, and ignited a narrative that stretched far beyond the confines of their small community. For the residents, the once simple streets now thrummed with a sobering recognition of the deep-seated racial issues that had lain dormant, like unseen roots beneath the surface. Snippets of conversations flickered with urgency as neighbors grappled with their consciences, each word a testament to the collective awakening that had seized Magnolia Creek. Reverend Thompson, fortified by his faith and recent conviction, walked the path to his church with renewed purpose. His congregation had dwindled in recent years, a casualty of modern distractions and the quiet affluence that enveloped the town like a comforting lie. But today, he sensed something different, a fervor, a community hungry for change and understanding, ready to bridge the chasm that inequality had gouged between them. Meanwhile, Jasmine, attuned to the growing rebellion against the systemic rot, stood at her bedroom window, gazing out over the town that had been both her shelter and her awakening. The memories of the pool incident still played on a loop in her mind, a cycle of trauma and revelation she had resolved to dismantle. Her phone chimed, drawing her attention to a text from Maya Carter, the indefatigable community organizer who had become an ally and a friend through recent events. Town hall meeting at noon. Let's push for the reform we talked about. We need everyone there. Jasmine acknowledged the message, a nod to the growing solidarity she found herself leading, a movement no longer hers alone to steer, but part of a broader coalition of hearts and minds. With each passing day, the town felt less like a battleground and more like fertile ground, ready to bear the fruit of long overdue change. At the precinct, whispers and glances darted between officers as they scrutinized their own. The camaraderie once taken for granted, now laced with suspicion and re-evaluation. Detective Sarah Green had advocated for transparency audits and investigative reforms, triggering a wave of support, both surprising and enlightening, a stark reminder of how entwined morality and identity were within the bag. Sheriff Holloway, still reconciling his roles as both enforcer and father, arrived at his office earlier than usual, his mind alike with plans to address the mounting challenges. From within the department, a meeting with community leaders arranged with a mixture of resolve and trepidation awaited him. A dialogue he hoped would mend bridges before burning them became a necessity. As the hours passed, the town hall began to brim with townsfolk, each carrying the weight of expectations, fears, and hopes for a future not merely rebuilt, but reimagined. Families arrived in clusters, their diversity a tapestry of the promises and challenges they faced together. Jasmine took her place at the helm alongside Maya, whose indomitable spirit shone like a beacon against the drab backdrop of bureaucracy they intended to challenge. Faces familiar and unknown greeted her, a testament to the work they all recognized as singularly necessary, the kindling of a collective heart catalyzed by their shared resolve. When the time came, Jasmine stepped forward, voices quieting, anticipatory, energy charging the air. This gathering was a reckoning, a confrontation with the injustices that had festered beneath civil surface-level pleasantries for far too long. Thank you all for being here, Jasmine began, her words firm, every inflection measured, yet brimming with the conviction that had branded her into a reluctant symbol of the movement. This isn't just about what happened to me. It's about everything that's allowed this kind of injustice to persist, unchecked for years. Nods of agreement rippled through the room, the audience leaning forward, names and stories written across faces reflecting the painful nostalgia of experiences they shared but rarely voiced. We're here to ensure it doesn't happen again, she continued, gesturing to Maya and the gathered figures of authority, ready to engage with the truth. Together, we will draft a new blueprint. Accountability from our police force, transparency in our community dealings, and an unyielding commitment to justice. We owe it to ourselves to rebuild our town in the shape of what we know it can be. Her words resonated, amplified by the support of silence, embraced by those drawn to this cause. Each person an instrument of collective will, determined to turn promises into practice, barriers into bridges. Sheriff Holloway, standing slightly apart, felt the potency of Jasmine's words weave through him. Equal parts fatherly pride and professional duty affirming their validity. He knew the scrutiny waiting for him, a test of all he proclaimed Magnolia Creek should embody, and felt resolved to carry his end of the challenge, to stand not above, but among the people he pledged to serve. As the meeting moved from speech to dialogue, voices rose and ebbed in cycles of debate and consensus, weaving a tapestry of ideals into actionable plans. Jasmine's intent and the community's momentum crystallized in shared determination, a future defined not by a fear of the past, but by the courage to craft a new narrative. In those hours, Magnolia Creek was transformed not by a mere hope, but by the tangible collective decision to act, overhauling systems sustained by passivity. The dialogue opened lines of communication long obstructed by hierarchy, breathing promises of an era driven by integrity and resilience. As dusk crept in and townsfolk spilled from the town hall into a cooler evening, they left as harbingers of change, a testament that transparency and truth had become more than words, but actions, ready to etch history anew. Beyond this meeting lay a landscape yet unnamed, a collective courage poised at the precipice of greatness, ready to claim justice for every Jasmine waiting to be heard. As the dust settled from the town hall meeting, an electric sense of resolve buzzed through Magnolia Creek, knitting the community closer despite the unresolved tension still lingering beneath the surface. Jasmine Holloway found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions, a tumult of hope interwoven with the weight of expectation, as if she were both the spark and the sentinel of the change they were slowly carving. The days since the incident had been a blur of momentum. Jasmine, once an ordinary high school student known for her academic prowess, was suddenly thrust into the spotlight, her identity now serving as a powerful symbol challenging an entrenched system with each headline and interview. But early morning found her seated at the dining room table, papers strewn about, news clippings, notes from meetings with community organizers, and sketches for plans of reform. Her phone lay among them, constantly buzzing with messages of support, solidarity, and offers of assistance. Yet beneath the avalanche of outreach lay the quiet, pressing fear that seemed to haunt even the strongest resolve, the fear of what lay ahead. "This is all a bit surreal, isn't it?" Riley, Jasmine's older brother, quipped as he entered the room, peering over her shoulder at the mess. His presence was grounding, reminding Jasmine of the familial balance that had been her anchor, even when the world seemed intent on tipping her overboard. "And never imagined our dining table would become ground zero for the community's reform movement," Jasmine replied, attempting levity, though her thoughts remained heavy with purpose. "You're doing amazing things," Riley offered, sincerity woven into each word. "This is bigger than all of us now, Jazz, but remember, in the face of all this, you're still you. Don't lose sight of that." Jasmine sighed, grateful, but apprehensive. "I know. It's just nobody prepared us for this. Leading a movement is different than joining one." He chuckled, sliding into the seat opposite her. "You're right about that, but you've always been good at picking up the slack." There was a pause, as he considered the swirling chaos of activism around them. "You've stirred something in this town that's long overdue." Their conversation paused as the doorbell chimed, its familiar ring echoing through the house. Jasmine glanced at Riley before rising. Already knowing who awaited outside, she swung the door open to find Maya Carter smiling warmly. As a seasoned activist, Maya's presence was a fusion of authority and camaraderie, a testament to the trust and respect she had fostered among her peers. Jasmine felt relieved at her arrival, knowing Maya was as vital to this effort as any individual could be, ready for another round of planning. Maya asked, stepping inside and exchanging nods with Riley, whose occasional involvement had been pivotal in rallying younger voices throughout their movement. Jasmine nodded, a flicker of confidence brightening her eyes. "More than ever, the meeting gave us a foothold, but now we need to climb." "Indeed," Maya agreed, setting her bag down beside the table and glancing over the collected documents, with Sheriff Holloway on board, and Green pushing for those internal audits at the precinct. "We've got momentum. Let's keep this moving." Conversation shifted into strategy. Steps to articulate their demands, details for action synchronized with the mounting resolve of the public. They drafted letters, outlined public forums, and devised petitions that targeted specific reforms within both the precinct and broader community culture. As their discussion deepened, Maya paused, her gaze settling thoughtfully on Jasmine. "You realize the weight of this may fall on you more than the rest of us," she remarked, her tone acknowledging the unsaid burdens Jasmine carried. Jasmine, contemplating the weight with an uncomfortable intimacy, met Maya's eyes. "I've thought about that, but people see my face, my name, it's become a symbol. Might as well make it an effective one." Maya nodded approvingly. "You've got the heart for this, as do many amongst us. Letting your personal strength guide us has done more change than decades of stagnant policy." The plans they set into motion were not merely calls to action. They were expressions of a collective dream shared by a town clinging to the possibility of reinvention. Scripts for speeches were drafted, careful language penciled into margins like talismans against misunderstanding. And as hours turned the pages of time, night descended once again on the weary town, marking the potency of a new beginning. The potency of a new beginning. As Maya prepared to leave, Jasmine followed her to the door, shadows lengthening in the fading light. A shared understanding lingered between them, a deep-seated acknowledgement of how far they had come and the journey yet to unfold. Turning back to Riley, still seated at the table, Jasmine noted his focus on the plans they had set. Resilience was rooted here in family and community woven tight, in hearts made steadfast by duty and love. The slogan from their recent meeting resurfaced in her thoughts. Certainty threading together ambition and aspiration into tangible resolve. Together we rebuild. As clean air filled her lungs, Jasmine understood that each voice raised, each hand joined, drew them closer to a day when Magnolia Creek would no longer exist as just a name, but as a testament to resilience, equity, and profound rebirth. Sunlight waned, but in Jasmine's heart, peace flickered bright, a flame undying. Its light partnered with countless others, resolving to illuminate the path forward. Inside the precinct, Officer Brent Salter stared out at the street through a narrow window, his mind adrift among the shadows his actions had cast. Anxiety gnawed at him, his once unyielding sense of authority shattered, leaving ruins where once conviction stood tall. He felt the tangible absence of camaraderie. The brotherhood that had always provided a sanctuary now eroded by his transgression. Brent had been summoned to his disciplinary hearing, an internal review that would decide not only his future in the force, but also how the community perceived justice within the badge. This incident, a blatant act of racism and abuse of power, served as a pivotal moment, a reckoning within precinct walls that could not be ignored. The hearing room was clinically austere, its stark lines and somber colors reflecting the gravity. Awaiting Brent behind its doors, Steve Harper, his former partner, stood just outside, an impassive figure serving as a silent reminder of the collective disappointment Brent had inflicted upon both their friendship and the brotherhood he once held dear. Steve nodded as Brent approached, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them, words left unsaid, yet heavy with their shared history. "Brent, remember, be honest, own up to your actions. It's the only way to salvage any dignity from this." Brent simply nodded, his throat tightening as the reality of the situation crystallized before him. "Thanks, Steve. I'm not sure how to." He cut off, unsure, intimidated by the labyrinth of consequences he was forced to traverse without a map. Steve's eyes softened. Despite everything, echoes of loyalty lingered still, echoes of disbelief and misplaced trust intertwined. "Just tell them what happened. Be real with them and yourself." Finally, mustering the courage, Brent turned to face his moment of judgment. Each step inside the hearing felt like a crucible, testing his resolve. Behind an oak desk dominated by files documenting his misconduct, the panel of commanding officers sat in measured silence, their features masks of authority, expectations, and patience worn thin by similar tales. Officer Salter, Please have a seat, Captain Torres instructed, her voice steady but firm, demanding respect by the mere power of observation rather than authority alone. Brent settled into the chair opposite, a gulf of experience and consequence sprawling between them. The panel awaited his recounting, a narrative he dreaded and rehearsed, each word a confession rather than a defense. Captain Torres leaned forward, steely eyes penetrating the silence. Officer Salter, she began, the somber command in her voice, casting aside any illusions. Can you explain your actions, the reasoning, and the escalation that led to Miss Holloway's assault? Brent paused each second and eternity as he struggled to articulate a defense that wouldn't buckle under the weight of truth. His voice, somewhat fragile, finally emerged. I didn't intend for it to happen the way it did. I let my judgment lapse, let aggression rule over procedure. The panel's scrutiny intensified, spurred by his wavering tone. A ripple within the more substantial tide of necessity washing over the precinct. What had once evaded the censuring light of introspection now surfaced in plain sight, demanding not just reckoning, but transformation. Captain Torres exchanged glances with her colleagues, exchanging silent communion before refocusing on Brent. Officer Salter, this isn't simply about procedures. It's about respect, humanity. You've seen the impact of Mr. Holloway's case. It shone a spotlight not just on your actions, but on the systemic failures within our ranks. Brandt's mask of stoicism crumbled, revealing a man grappling with the weight of choices made in haste and anger. I've come to realize that, he admitted quietly. The admission scarcely a whisper against the room's oppressive air. What I did was wrong, and if it means stepping back, then I'll accept whatever decision you make. Recognition unfolded with a firmness echoing through the panel, the understanding that justice, while painful, was necessary. Retribution, a vehicle of hope as much as consequence. From this hearing, a precedent would be set. Partnerships unraveled through honesty to weave anew within the tapestry of reform. Jasmine Holloway had helped cast aloft. In the aftermath of the confession, deliberations would sculpt Brent's path forward. A journey fraught with humility and lessons tempered in personal trials. Still, under the accusative lamp of judgment, he felt the cold hand of realization, a chance to remake himself, if not in the police force, then beyond its blue confines. As the hearing adjourned, leaving Brent to await his fate amidst the echoes of potential redemption, the clock tilted away from the shadows, promising change. With each swing of its pendulum, outside the precinct, Magnolia Creek stood bathed in the waning light of reconciliation's promise. A town sobered by the juxtaposition of loss and resolve, emboldened now by a shared commitment sustained through their struggles, a resilience embodied by citizens like Jasmine and allies willing to fight that her moment of injustice might become a rallying cry for equity, weaving compassion and accountability into the community's very fabric. As Brent left the room, stepping into the corridor of uncertainty, he understood that change had enveloped more than just policy. It had crept into consciousness, stirring ethical evolution where complacency had once reigned. His journey, perhaps marred with shame, might also illuminate the path for others within and beyond the precinct, primed to reflect, rebuild, and remember the power of empathy when ignorance fades away. The media frenzy descended upon Magnolia Creek like a storm, an unyielding force that swept through the quiet town with an insatiable appetite for narrative and scandal. Reporters and news vans crowded the main streets, their presence a glaring testament to the reach of Jasmine Holloway's ordeal. An incident that had now transcended local gossip and burgeoned into a national conversation about race, authority, and justice. Jasmine found herself thrust into the eye of this media storm, every moment of her day under scrutiny, every word weighed with significance far beyond its original intent. Invitations to speak appeared relentless, arcing from small-town papers to major network newsrooms, each one clamoring for her voice to fill their broadcasts, each seeking to capture her experience in a soundbite encapsulating the depth of systemic rot she had become unwittingly tasked to expound. On this particular day, Jasmine sat in a well-lit studio, the bright lights harsh against her skin, contrasting sharply with her internal state, a mix of determination and anxiety swirling just beneath the surface. Across from her, a prominent anchor prepared her notes, rehearsing the questions that promised insight into Jasmine's evolving role as both victim and crusader. "Welcome back," the anchor said with professional warmth as the cameras began rolling, their red lights piercing the atmosphere with quiet insistence. "With us today is Jasmine Holloway at the center of the incident, fueling current national discussions on police reform." Jasmine, heart steady and voice calm, nodded in acknowledgement. Her role here was clear, to not only share her truth, but to mold it into fuel for the burgeoning movement that had sprouted from the ashes of personal trauma. "Desmond," the anchor continued, "your experience has deeply touched many lives. How does it feel to see your story having such a widespread impact?" She took a breath, her thoughts a clear current of conviction. "I'm grateful that people are listening," she began, a flicker of intensity lighting her gaze. "But it's not just my story. It's a collective experience shared by so many who've been marginalized and silenced. I stand here because of them, not just for them," the anchor nodded, steering the conversation. "In light of the recent hearing for Officer Brent Salter, what changes are you hoping to see moving forward?" Jasmine paused, the weight of expectation meeting the unwavering pulse of her determination. "I'm hopeful for comprehensive reform," she stated, her voice firm yet nuanced with the wisdom acquired through lived experience. "We need transparency in law enforcement, accountability for misconduct, and a justice system that protects rather than persecutes. This goes beyond punishing individuals. It's about systemic change. Outside the studio, in homes and public spaces, viewers watched the interview, absorbing the strength and vulnerability of a young woman whose unwilling brush with injustice had catalyzed their own introspection. Conversations blossomed in living rooms, at kitchen tables, and within offices. Discussions once avoided now deemed crucial to societal growth. Meanwhile, at the precinct, internally mandated changes took root with varying degrees of reluctance. Policies were reviewed, training programs scrutinized and revised under the newly installed reforms advocated tirelessly by those inspired by Jasmine's fervor. Detective Sarah Green, now spearheading the Integrity Initiative, worked alongside Sheriff Holloway, defining new standards where old ones had failed. In the days following the hearing, Brent Salter had chosen a path forward, navigating a personal redemption outside the police force. His story, too, became a part of the evolving discourse on responsibility and learning, a narrative folding into the larger dialogue of Magnolia Creek's transformation. As the anchor wrapped up the segment, Jasmine felt a sense of closure, not an end, but a step forward in the long journey toward realizing the promises she and others had envisioned. "Thank you for sharing your insights, Jasmine," the anchor concluded, a nod of genuine admiration crossing her features. "Your strength is inspiring." Jasmine offered a small, appreciative smile. "Thank you for listening," she replied, aware that dialogue, no matter how difficult, was the cornerstone of progress. After the cameras stopped rolling, the studio faded to the background as she stepped out into the world again, the weight of her story balanced by the chorus of voices now joining hers. The journey ahead was daunting, but also filled with potential. A path laden with the promise of a community awakened and a future recalibrated by justice. As she walked away from the building, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows that whispered quietly of a new dawn approaching. Her shoes tapped against the pavement, each step a reminder that change, once ignited by a spark of truth, could no longer be extinguished, but would burn brightly, clearing a path through the dense forest of injustice and guiding those who dared to follow. Sheriff Holloway sat in the quiet of his office, the room a sanctuary of muted tones and reflective silence. Part of him still wrestled with the turbulent events that had thrust his daughter into the national spotlight. Yet another part recognized this moment as an opportunity, a chance to reshape not just the department, but the very ethos that governed community interactions in Magnolia Creek, the town hall meeting was a turning point, a catalyst in the ongoing struggle for equity. Yet, it also served as the beginning of an arduous journey. Sheriff Holloway had spent his career walking the delicate line between law enforcement and community service, but it was clear now that neutrality was no longer an option. Action was needed, swift and decisive, to bridge the chasm that had lingered between the town's people and the policing they hardly trusted. His office was a testament to years of dedication. Shelves lined with books on law and justice, plaques of commendation for years of service, photographs capturing moments of triumph and community. But it was the photograph on his desk that drew his gaze. An image of Jasmine when she was just a child, her eyes filled with boundless curiosity and hope. A soft knock at the door stirred him from his thoughts. Sarah Green, the detective spearheading their internal reform efforts, stepped in, her expression a juxtaposition of determination tempered by introspection. "Sheriff," she began, closing the door behind her, "we've set the groundwork for the changes we discussed. The transparency audits are underway, and we're updating our training programs to include bias training and de-escalation tactics." Holloway nodded, absorbing the gravity of what they were undertaking. "Good," he replied, his voice a blend of authority and gratitude. "It's imperative we not only address past mistakes, but pave a better pathway forward. We owe that much not only to Jasmine, but to every person in this town." Sarah approached his desk, setting down a folder filled with documents detailing their progress. "This is just the beginning," she said, her tone solemn. "We've got data to analyze and strategies to implement, but I believe we're making strides towards real meaningful change." Sheriff Holloway reflected on her words, the weight of leadership settling upon his shoulders like an old familiar coat. In this moment of reckoning, he knew that real change required more than policy shifts. It demanded a cultural transformation, a rethinking of values, unshackling the past binds of complacency. His office phone rang, the jingling sound cutting through the contemplation like a beacon. He picked it up, listening intently, his face registering a gamut of emotions as the voice on the other end relayed newfound updates from their ongoing community feedback sessions. As he hung up the phone, Holloway turned to Sarah, renewed purpose, igniting the depths of his gaze. "The feedback's overwhelmingly in favor of our new measures," he reported, a hint of a smile breaking through. "People are hopeful, ready to support these reforms." Outside the precinct, the streets began to mirror this shift. The town, once caught in a stranglehold of inertia, now thrummed with the kinetic energy of possibility. Conversations in coffee shops, at neighborhood bridges, and in local schools were chapters unfolding in real time, blueprints of hope rewriting the town's destiny. Moreover, Reverend Thompson, spurred by the bubbling call of advocacy, organized interfaith gatherings bridging differences with empathy, focusing on healing and collective action. These meetings, marked by discourse and diverse perspectives, sought to embolden the community with a unified stance on equity, embracing their shared humanity as the cornerstone for their redefined identity. In this spirit of revival, Jasmine Holloway herself became a voice not only in the media, but an integral part of these dialogues, lending authenticity and agency to the unfolding narrative of change. She walked the streets with Maya Carter, both women emblematic of the power found at the crossroads of past and future, determined leaders shaping the contours of new realities with each step. The precinct's transparency audits moved forward, uncovering areas of bias and suggesting methods to foster inclusion. Conversations happening internally to ensure past failures informed future victories. Brent Salter's hearing had illuminated paths not just for justice, but for redemption, a narrative element teaching all involved the complex lessons of responsibility in community roles. Every change, each moment seized, rippled outward, impacting beyond Magnolia Creek's borders, inspiring nearby communities to reassess their values and cloak themselves in the courage of reclamation. Sheriff Holloway saw it now clearer than ever. Systemic realignment required vigilance and action, authenticity fueling the courage to uproot entrenched wrongs. By addressing each crack in their foundation with wisdom and compassion, the town embarked on not merely rebuilding, but chronicling stories of hope and resilience, the legacy of a moment poised to be remembered for the coming together of voices unafraid to demand transformation. As the day faded into a tranquil evening, Holloway stood by his office window, looking out at the town, steadfast under the canopy of dusk. In his heart, he carried the knowledge that the journey was far from over, but they were undeniably on the right path toward justice, toward understanding, and inexorably toward a future filled with potential and unyielding light. Jasmine Holloway sat at the edge of her bed, the hum of the evening settling around her like a comforting quilt. The weight of recent events still lingered, a tether to a past that kept rearing its head, trying to reshape her into something unrecognizable. But within that chaos, she had found a new thread of purpose, one that glowed with the potential of illuminating paths, not just for herself, but for the countless others trapped in the same web of injustice. Her phone vibrated gently against the nightstand, the screen illuminating with messages of support, updates from community organizers, and inquiries from journalists still eager to capture her voice. Jasmine sighed, the barrage, a constant reminder of her reluctant celebrity, but also of the responsibility that now nestled alongside it. Today had been a fulcrum in her journey, a day spent both in reflection and in actively planning avenues for change. She had met with advocates, educators, and local leaders, all uniting under the banner of reform, each conversation a tapestry of ideas woven together with the common thread of justice. One particular meeting had left a mark held in the modest library at Magnolia Creek High School. It was a gathering of young minds eager to understand and contribute to the fight for equality. Students had filled the small room, their faces a rich tapestry of backgrounds, each gaze filled with the determination to shape a future unburdened by the mistakes of the past. As Jasmine took the makeshift stage, she saw herself reflected in their eyes, an echo of her younger self before the mantle of activism had been thrust upon her. She spoke candidly, her words a blend of truth and encouragement, acknowledging both her struggles and her emerging strength. "We all have a role to play," she stated, sensing the power her words held among these students. "Change doesn't just happen in laws or policies. It happens in our everyday actions, in how we treat one another. It starts with us questioning what's wrong and dreaming of what could be right." Their applause was both a comfort and a call to action, a surge of energy reinforcing the alliance being forged in the fires of shared experience. A young girl, hesitant yet hopeful, approached Jasmine afterward, her voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying the potential of a bell's clarity. "Miss Holloway," she began, her eyes flickering between Jasmine and the papers clutched against her chest. "I used to feel like nothing I did mattered, but your story gave me courage. How can we be part of this, part of making things better?" Jasmine smiled, feeling the warmth of solidarity, building a bridge between them. "We can start small," she replied, her voice gentle but unwavering. "Organize discussions in your school. Amplify voices that aren't heard. Educate yourselves and others on your rights. Every small step counts toward the movement for change." The girl nodded, a reflection of resolve lighting her features. In her, Jasmine saw the next generation, a lineage of potential, ready to continue the work begun in such tumultuous times. As she bid goodbye to the students, she left with a revitalized heart, understanding that nurturing this flame among the young was as crucial as any legislation or policy reform. Back home, Jasmine leafed through a journal she had begun keeping, a chronicle of experiences and realizations spawned from the incident. It was filled with her thoughts, candid memos to the self, blueprints not just for advocacy, but for healing, urging herself to remember that justice was not a destination, but a journey marked by persistence and patience. Her father's voice echoed softly from the hallway just outside her door, speaking into the phone. confirming meetings, coordinating with organizers, the weight of his dual roles as sheriff and father palpable in every spoken word. He was committed to the change he promised during the town hall. His actions not just symbolizing institutional reform, but embodying a paternal promise to Jasmine and the community alike. As the night deepened, Jasmine felt the familiar whisper of doubt wrestle momentarily with hope, a dance of shadows and light ever present within her. Yet steady within her heart was the vow she had silently embraced to turn her struggle into a shield, her voice into an instrument of change. Echoing across time, she lay back, staring up at the ceiling, tracing imaginary lines of possibility that spiraled outwards from her fingertips. The journey was far from over, but with each step forward, a new horizon appeared, a promise that each tomorrow held the potential to steer their collective story toward healing and justice. As sleep claimed her, Jasmine carried with her the affirmations of the day, their resonance thrumming gently, guiding her into dreams unburdened by the constraints of doubt. Her journey, inherited by a town ready to shed the past, was one of resilience, courage, and unwavering hope, forging a path forward under the persistent canopy of freshly stirred stars. The community rally was a sight to behold, a testament to the resilience and unity born from the shared struggles of Magnolia Creek. The town square, usually a quiet space of reflection, buzzed with energy, banners fluttering boldly against the backdrop of the midday sun. Families gathered, children perched on shoulders, their young faces absorbing the electric atmosphere, a living lesson in the power of collective action. Jasmine Holloway stood at the heart of it, her presence, a pillar around which the gathered citizens drew strength. Every conversation, every shared glance felt charged with purpose. What had begun as her personal ordeal had blossomed into a movement that transcended individual narratives, weaving the stories of many into a unified demand for justice. Maya Carter, ever the catalyst for action, moved through the crowd, her enthusiasm infectious, rallying people with her trademark blend of passion and humor. "This is history in the making," she called out, her voice a beacon drawing stragglers into the fold. "We're not just rewriting the narrative. We're tearing up the script." Reverend Thompson, clad in his distinctive vestments, lifted his voice, in prayer and resolve, framing the gathering within a spiritual context that touched every corner of the square. His message was simple yet profound, reminding all that the fight for justice was both sacred and secular, a calling to the better angels of their nature. Jasmine watched as her father, Sheriff Holloway, entered the square with members of the precinct, their solidarity a testament to the change that had taken root within the town's law enforcement. It was a rare sight, uniforms blending into the crowd rather than observing from its periphery, signaling an earnest commitment to their own transformation. Nearby, a group of teenagers Jasmine had met at the high school formed a small chorus, their voices rising in song, a soulful melody encapsulating hope and perseverance. Their harmonies wove through the air, all lighting on shoulders like invisible handshakes, reassuring adults of the youth's steadfast contribution to their shared future. As the time approached for her to speak, Jasmine felt the familiar churn of nervous energy, an internal mix of fear and conviction, wrestling for dominance. But there, amid her people, her community, she found her ground. Tapping into the well of strength she'd cultivated from both her experiences and the unwavering support of those around her. Stepping up to the makeshift podium, made sturdy by hands that believed in its purpose, Jasmine let her gaze sweep over the crowd. Friends, family, strangers, united in a common cause. The sight filled her with an emotion she could barely contain, a potent blend of gratitude and determination. "Today," she began, her voice clear and reverberating with intention, "we gather not to recount our pains, but to celebrate our resilience. We are a mosaic of narratives, each uniquely powerful, yet when pieced together, we form an unbreakable force dedicated to justice and equality." The crowd responded with applause, a rolling wave of affirmation underscoring her words. "We stand here hand in hand because silence is not an option. We refuse to accept a world where the dignity of one can be dismissed, where the value of our lives is debated instead of uplifted. Jasmine's words resonated deeply, each phrase carefully chosen to inspire hope and challenge inertia. Her role as both storyteller and change-maker clear to all in attendance. The gathering was more than an assembly. It was a celebration of community, a declaration of intent to reshape their collective future. As long as we breathe, we will dream, she continued, her voice strengthening with each word. We will build a community where justice is our foundation and love our cornerstone, a legacy of action that future generations will inherit and cherish. Again, the crowd roared its approval. The diversity of voices creating an insistent chorus, a promise to hold this momentum and carry it forward. Jasmine felt the magnitude of their commitment, a living entity poised to transcend the boundaries of current understanding. Maya joined her on the podium, raising a fist in solidarity, the universal salute for unity and protest. "This is the beginning," she shouted, echoing the sentiment that thrummed through every conversation and handshake. "Magnolia Creek is just the start. Let's take this vision far and wide." The rally became a tapestry of humanity, each thread vibrant with possibility, a living, breathing testament to what happens when individuals converge with a shared dream of equality. Stories of systemic injustice were shared alongside words of hope and aspirations for structural change, weaving a comprehensive narrative that recognized past wounds while seeking healing. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the horizon with hues of hope and resolution, the rally's energy settled into a steadfast promise. Jasmine knew this was only one chapter in their unfolding story, a pivotal moment heralding more actions to come, carrying them ever closer to the world they envisioned. In the quiet that followed the rally as the square began to empty, Jasmine lingered, absorbing the energy left behind by those who believed in her vision and shared her pain. She stood shoulder to shoulder with Maya and Reverend Thompson, their collective hearts alight with the fire of change, an insistent flame that burned bright against the night, illumining the pathway forward. With each step they took under the canopy of stars, Magnolia Creek awakened anew, ready to usher in a new dawn filled with the promise of equity, justice, and the unwavering resolve of its people to keep the fire burning until every shadow had been chased away. As the echoes of applause from the rally lingered in the air, a quiet resolve settled over Magnolia Creek. With the fervor of the gathering still pulsating in their veins, the community found itself at a pivotal juncture, ready to pivot from impassioned speeches to palpable reform. The path ahead, though fraught with challenges, was illuminated by the collective decision to hold every injustice accountable. Against this backdrop of transformation, Officer Brent Salter stood at a crossroads of his own. The hearing, now behind him, had stripped away the facade he once wore so meticulously. He was left with a raw understanding of his actions, a comprehension of the pain and division they had seen. The town's movement had opened a doorway, and though he stood hesitant and alone, it was a path he had resolved to pursue. A journey less concerned with redemption and more with responsibility. Brent found himself revisiting familiar streets with different eyes, his perspective reshaped by the weight of reflection. The routines and interactions that had once seemed mundane now teemed with nuances he had previously ignored. The community he had served was suddenly more vibrant, alive with stories and struggles that had been invisible shadows against his previous outlines of duty. As he walked through the town center, he was met with a spectrum of reactions: curiosity, uncertainty, and a tempered willingness to extend understanding. Among these nuanced exchanges was an encounter that perhaps had the greatest impact. Jasmine Holloway, her silhouette unmistakable against the backdrop of the setting sun, appeared on the path before him, her posture a mixture of strength and quiet grace. The tension between them was palpable, a response forged not from fear, but from the gravity of their intertwined narratives. Brent halted, words lodged uncomfortably within him. A myriad of apologies piled against the silence. He noted the lines of courage in Jasmine's face, lines carved by resilience and tempered by the narratives that transcended personal pain. "Jasmine," he began, his voice faltering but sincere, "I've caused you so much hurt. I didn't want to face what I'd become, but this what you've started. It's opened my eyes." She acknowledged his words with a measured nod, each moment steeped in the complexity of their shared history. "What happened was more than me," she replied, her tone firm yet reflective. "But I hope you see beyond the surface now." Brent met her gaze, a quiet determination, replacing the disoriented guilt in his eyes. "I do. I'm trying to put things right. It's long past time for me to listen, to understand." The moment stretched between them, a bridge fragile yet laden with the promise of understanding. Jasmine's face softened, recognizing sincerity where it was rarely found. "Every step counts," she offered, echoing a belief that underpinned the movements sweeping through Magnolia Creek, small actions gathering momentum to stir real change. As they parted ways, Brent felt a shift, a realignment of purpose within him, kindled by Jasmine's grace. Every interaction, every conversation had become a doorway into the heart of a community ready to heal. His role now to support rather than dictate. Meanwhile, at the precinct, seismic changes continued to transform the grounds. Detective Sarah Green had ushered in a culture of transparency, guiding officers through workshops that dissected deep-rooted biases and designed solutions grounded in empathy and community collaboration. The precinct that had once been a fortress of tradition now opened itself vulnerably to scrutiny. Driven by the vision Jasmine had awakened within them all, Sheriff Holloway, invigorated by the success of the rally and the sincere efforts from within his ranks, devised strategies to embed these changes deeply into the precinct's operational fabric, envisioning a dynamic where the police were truly integrated and accountable to the community they served. These changes did not come without pushback. Skepticism loomed in corners where fear of losing control nestled among some officers. But as days folded into weeks, even the most ardent skeptics found the resistance wearing thin, reshaped by the evidence of collaboration and the sense of unity blooming under Jasmine's collective advocacy. In the heart of the town, amidst bustling cafes and shaded parks imbued with autumn's vibrant hues, conversations hummed with fervor. People inspired to push passivity aside and step into this era with conviction. Initiatives sprang from this: communal embrace, diversity workshops, cultural events, and neighborhood meetings, fostering connections once deemed impossible. As Magnolia Creek moved forward, its steps were marked by unyielding commitment to transformation, invigorated by every act of courage, every word of solidarity shared between citizens. Jasmine's influence had reached not just the law that governed them, but the hearts that beat the rhythm of life. Into the town's very veins, the tapestry of Magnolia Creek, once stained by discord and disparity, now unfurled with color and promise, brushing its edges against the sky as if to lift the limitations of yesterday. The town, its people, and its protectors walked together along the dawned horizon, each determined to leave an indelible mark of justice across the generations. In the echo of footsteps guided by goodwill, Brent and Jasmine both found themselves transformed, one by acts complicating the other. Their paths a testament to the power found in reconciliation, honest acknowledgement, and the resolve to thrive. Together beyond the brokenness, hearts eager to mend a kinship forged from understanding, embracing the rich diversity that painted Magnolia Creek's future with unapologetic hope. The Magnolia Creek Courthouse buzzed with anticipation, a historic atmosphere settling into the marrow of its ancient bones as community members filtered in, each step a declaration of their commitment to justice and reform. Today marked the beginning of a trial, not just for Brent Salter, but for the integrity of the justice system itself. A dichotomy of stories dissected and pieced together under the cold scrutiny of law. Jasmine Holloway arrived with an air of composed determination, her presence a reminder of the fragility and strength endured to stand at this precipice. The morning sun streamed through the courthouse windows, casting long shadows that danced across the floors like silent judges contemplating the events about to unfold. Inside the courtroom, the seats filled quickly, Friends and family sat shoulder to shoulder, with strangers, united in bearing witness. Reporters lined the back, their silent notepads betraying an eagerness to capture a narrative of accountability, an unfolding redemption of justice or a grim reminder of its pitfall. At the front, the judge presided with a measured expression, resilient against the intensity of public expectation mirrored in the gallery before him. The court clerks shuffled their papers with brisk efficiency, the room calibrated to the rhythm of legal proceedings about to begin. Brent Salter entered the room, a solemn figure stripped of his uniform, but draped in the invisible weight of his deeds. His counsel moved with him, a poised professional, guiding him through the protocols that would determine whether justice served was justice seen. Jasmine watched him cross the threshold into view, empathy and expectation blending into a single lens through which she viewed his altered demeanor. This trial transcended punishment. It was a crucible, redefining his character and their community's resolve to uphold the values laid down in ink and memory. The air stood still as the judge called the court to order, his gavel striking a solemn cadence rebounding off the walls. Brent's trial was more than his story. It was a tapestry demanding they confront the tapestry of bias, authority, and social responsibility that plagued the corridors of justice. From the prosecution's table, Andrea Greenway, a formidable lawyer with a reputation for meticulous preparation, rose with confidence, her voice carrying the weight of carefully crafted intentions. Your Honor, members of the jury, today we are not merely trying Officer Salter for his actions. We are seeking to understand the depth of systemic failures and misjudgments that led us here. Her words set the stage for a narrative of change, introducing the idea that reform did not merely hold individuals accountable, but required a cleansing of ingrained neglect and prejudice. Brandt's defense attorney, Richard Carter, an astute strategist seasoned in the art of defense, countered, with measured reason, while Officer Salter's actions were deeply regrettable, we must also consider his character, his service, and his remorse as integral elements of this narrative. Their opening statements painted a courtroom landscape where every person present imagined themselves as agents of justice, willing the truth to emerge, uncloaked from bias or sentiment. As witnesses took the stand, their testimonies unfurled like ribbons of humanity, exhibiting the spectrum of error and courage entwined within Brandt's actions. Among them, Jasmine recounted her experiences, not just as a victim thrust into the spotlight, but as a conduit for countless voices, unheard and unseen until now. The day began like any other, she started, her words precise and impactful, her presence a testament to resilience unbounded by personal sufferings. Yet, what transpired became a catalyst for change beyond what anyone imagined. This isn't just my story. It's about confronting the societal structures that allowed it to happen. Her testimony wove a rich tapestry of insight, offering the court a window into the ripple effect an individual's actions coupled with institutional inertia could unleash. Her narrative resonated compellingly with jurors, and as she stepped down, a murmur of acknowledgement rippled through the gallery. Throughout the proceedings, the deliberation echoed a search not only for justice, but for an understanding, a transformative quest, aligning expectations with reality, seeking balance in both accountability and forgiveness. Brandt, seated beside his counsel, experienced each testimony like a mantra for his rehabilitation. Moments illuminated by introspection, opportunities to shift his ethos from duty to dialogue, balance drawn delicately between consequence and potential redemption. As the declamatory rhythms of closing arguments resounded, a battle-worn plea for clarity among complexity, the room paused at a crossroad of contemplation. The verdict, still pending, lay suspended in the balance, representing more than punitive measures for Salter. It signified a renewal, a chapter etched by a fervent commitment to justice and reform. As silence enveloped the space, hearts in Magnolia Creek beat in unison, bound to the outcome by scenes of collective hope and determination that truth wrapped in justice would unfurl anew, carrying with it a beacon of possibility, not only for Brent, but for every soul seeking clarity within the imperfect throes of justice. In those very halls, fractured yet enduring, the essence of Magnolia Creek's spirit became etched in each deliberating moment, a testament to the power of voices, rising through adversity, poised to craft a legacy redefined by empathy and perseverance, awaiting only the hands of time to turn will into reality. The gallery sat in hushed anticipation, a collective breath held as the trial continued its intricate dance through testimonies and exhibits, slowly unfurling the complex weave of actions, intentions, and consequences that had led to this pivotal moment. A palpable tension radiated through the air, stretching the patience of jurors and spectators alike, each seeking clarity amidst the labyrinth of justice. Today, the focus shifted to witnesses whose perspectives had been until now peripheral, a crucial pivot in understanding the broader tapestry interwoven with Brent Salter's narrative. Among these new voices was Mrs. Hernandez, the neighbor who had been a quiet, yet significant observer of community dynamics. As she took the stand, the weight of her testimony cast ripples through the courtroom, her presence both dignified and poignant, a reminder of the everyday vigilance required of those scrutinized by authority. Adjusting her glasses, Mrs. Hernandez surveyed the courtroom, her gaze steady and contemplative. Mrs. Hernandez, Andrea Greenway began, her voice resonating with an attentive audience. Can you recount what you observed on that day at the pool and perhaps share your views on the relationship between the community and law enforcement here in Magnolia Creek? Mrs. Hernandez nodded, her memories of the incident clear despite the passage of time. I remember the sun was bright, she began, voice rich with the depth of lived experiences. And the pool was crowded, but there was tension underneath, like thunder before the rain. Her deliberate pacing painted a vivid image of that fateful day, each word probing deeper into collective memory within the courtroom's confines. I saw Jasmine, she continued, her tone becoming firmer, and it pained me to watch, knowing the history, how fear and misunderstanding can boil over into these moments. But this incident, it hasn't shattered us. Instead, here we stand, pushing for change, and that's something different. Her testament bridged the personal with the communal, capturing the evolution from victimhood to empowerment, a theme resonant throughout the trial's arc. Defense counsel Richard Carter, cautious in his approach, sought to temper her vivid recollection with perspective. Mrs. Hernandez, he prompted, given the complexities of that day, is it possible that misunderstandings fueled the actions you describe? Her response was measured, each word a stone, paving a direct path to clarity. Misunderstandings are possible, but they don't excuse what occurred. They don't excuse the power imbalance that silences voices instead of lifting them. That is why I'm here to speak unmuted. Her words left an indelible mark, weaving her experience into the larger narrative that encapsulated the heart of this trial. A quest for truth amid systemic complexities and personal reckonings. As Mrs. Hernandez stepped down, the gallery absorbed her insights. Layers of history and community woven into the intricate fabric of Magnolia Creek's identity. Her impact extended beyond the proceedings, becoming a testament to what happens when voices once silenced are given platform. The indomitable strength they bring to bear on justice's scales. Next came Officer Tom Randall, a colleague voicing the reflections and recalibrations that had swept through the precinct in the aftermath of the incident. His account was less about defending a friend and more about illustrating the cultural shift within their ranks, a change ignited by pain and sustained by resolve. Rent worked under pressure, Tom stated, hands clasped as he searched for the right balance of empathy and honesty. We all do, but what we've learned through this process is that protecting means listening, evolving. That's our oath. The proceedings rendered a poignant tapestry of opinions, realities converging and diverging upon a singular axis of change, a narrative no longer about Brent Salter alone, but about dismantling the specter of unchecked authority. Through testimony and reflection, jurors found themselves bridges between old and new, a journey through time and tension that demanded deliberate pauses amid decisions fraught with consequence. Outside, beneath the sprawling arms of the courthouse steps, the town continued breathing life into action, inspired by Jasmine's ordeal. Local youth, invigorated by their newfound agency, organized community events and intergenerational forums on empathy and justice. Their vigor a binding thread among the divergent arcs of Magnolia Creek's story. The day's proceedings closed with a thoughtful recess, the courtroom emptying its charge into the midday air, a promise carrying narratives of wrong and right, penning new chapters in Solidarity Inc. In the quiet aftermath, Brent found himself reflecting deeply, a mosaic of realizations reshaping him anew, each voice, each story etched lessons within him, the weight of wrongs acknowledged, becoming bearers of transformative potential where the path forward demanded more than reflection. It required purpose. Jasmine, who had seen the trials and testimonies blend into a single clarifying lens of communal vision, their strength drawn from the courage to engage vulnerability and accountability in equal measure. Bound by shared resolve, Magnolia Creek stood as both witness and architect to its genesis. Justice's essence colored not by absolutes, but by humanity's persistent pursuit of equity, nurturing grains of a new reality beneath feet, yet untraveled. The trial had become more than a verdict on Brent Salter. It was a challenge to inertia, urging hearts toward futures unshackled by shadows of the past. A trial marking the human spirit's steadfast brilliance, unyielding in its march toward the dawn of justice reimagined. Inside the courtroom, the proceedings reached a crescendo as the trial delved into the exposed depths of institutional failure, shedding light on the broader systemic issues that had paved the way for Brent Salter's actions. The atmosphere was a taut web of expectation and unspoken fears, every heart attuned to the rhythms of reparation and hope envisaged by the community's calls for reform. Andrea Greenway, the prosecution's steady hand, advanced into a pivotal phase of the trial. With keen precision, she systematically pieced together a timeline of complaints and overlooked misconduct within the precinct, a mosaic of missed opportunities that underscored a narrative where negligence took root. For too long, Greenway articulated to the rapt jury, certain red flags within law enforcement have been diminished, reshaped by an unwritten code of silence that masks over accountability. Officer Salter is one piece of this puzzle, but look beyond him to the systemic machinery that requires overhaul. Salter said that the evidence presented was damning. Reports filed away, complaints muted within bureaucratic indifference, dashed, hopes for justice circulating silently amongst those who dared to speak, but found themselves unheeded, eventually silenced by the very system promising protection. From his seat, Brent watched, unned by the realities unraveling before him, a tacit admission of culpability made visible through the neglected whispers of past grievances. Each testimony and exhibit felt like a mirror reflecting missed chances of redemption, each silence an indictment of camaraderie misplaced. In response, the defense sought to humanize Brent further, painting a picture of a man misled, but not beyond forgiveness. Richard Carter confronted the moral intricacies lurking under layers of professional dedication and personal misjudgment. Despite these institutional shortcomings, Carter posited, gesturing toward the gallery, we have seen a willingness in Officer Salter to confront his failures personally and openly. Should he not be given the opportunity to contribute constructively to future reforms? His question lingered like fog-shaped uncertainty amid stark clarity, showcasing the cautious tug-of-war between justice served and lessons learned. The room swayed under the collective weight of grappling with justice and mercy. Reconciliation among an array of intentions colliding within the space. Each perspective a unique hue contributing to the chromatic flow of the trial's tapestry. The culmination of evidence reached its zenith with Captain Torres's testimony, whose years overseeing the precinct translated into a reluctant illumination of institutional habits that had resisted change, an understanding enriched by her commitment to stewarding reform. Admitting our faults is the cornerstone for transformation, Torres confessed solemnly. Only by recognizing our lapses can we hope to cultivate an alliance with those we serve. Her stance did not absolve Brent, but anchored the need for responsibility. Amongst the systemic tides, ordering Magnolia Creek's future, a restoration found not merely in punishment, but in collective atonement through progress. As the session adjourned for deliberations, jurors found themselves inched in earnest discussions about the ideals of justice and community resilience, their mandate transcending individual culpability and encompassing the shared pursuit for a society guided by vigilance, not fear. Outside, clusters of community members gathered beneath canopies of enduring magnolia blossoms, exchanging hopeful stories of healing and empowerment nurtured amidst adversity. The trial had inflamed not only a desire for truth, but also wisdom. Shaped by patient, Jasmine Holloway joined these conversations, her voice an anchor buoying determination to align actions with ideals. A steward of this expanding movement, nestled in her town's heart. Her journey had become not one of mere survival, but of leading a community toward illumination. Within her command center, Detective Sarah Green reviewed initiatives stemming from the courtroom revelations, her office now a hive of transformative energy, plans for diversity training, integrity oversight, and community liaison groups underpin precinct reforms, breathing life into commitments once confined to ideals. Sheriff Holloway, simultaneously nurturing personal and professional vows, cultivated dialogues with those entrusting him with the balancing act of protecting and listening, building alliances that transcended the confines of his uniform. As dusk settled once more across Magnolia Creek, the courthouse no longer simply whispered stories of legal proceedings. It sang the beginning notes of a town determined to redefine its symphony of justice. Awaiting the verdict was not an end, but a continuation of efforts spearheaded by lives touched irrevocably by the urgency of change. In every silent corner, within every sunlit corridor, voices merged, becoming an anthem, a collective fabric embracing accountability woven through the veins of Magnolia Creek, heralding a dawn imbued with the promise of equity and the relentless pursuit of reform. This trial, more than a judgment upon one, had become a prism refracting towards a justice truly reflective of humanity's pervasive longing to mend, integrate, and aspire. Through the thickening twilight, hearts pulsed in synchronicity, whispering resilient dreams of a future scripted in acts of courage, footprints impressed upon earth, etching patterns of integrity, patiently crafting Magnolia Creek into a beacon of justice reimagined. The courtroom was packed to capacity, each bench filled with expectant faces, their eyes tracing every movement, every gesture made in the solemn space. For Jasmine Holloway, being there felt surreal, a place born of her personal nightmare. But, now the podium for her new role and the beacon for justice and reform. Her breath was steady, heart a rhythmic reminder of the weight her testimony carried. As she approached the stand, her steps echoed through the hushed room, a metronome marking the passage of courage. She was not here simply as the symbol of a community's righteous anger, but as the unwavering voice of lived experience, carrying the demands and dreams of many on her shoulders. Facing the assembly, she found a connection in the silent support that met her gaze, the sincerity palpable amid a sea of empathy and resolve. Andrea Greenway, the prosecutor who had deftly navigated the tides of this landmark trial, gave a composed nod, reinforcing the relationality they had formed through hard conversations and shared vision. Miss Holloway, Greenway began, her voice a conduit for truth. Could you describe the impact that this event and the subsequent developments have had on you and the community at large? Jasmine took a moment, grounding herself in the truth she had prepared to share, a truth both deeply personal and universally resonant. This ordeal, she started, her voice gathering strength with each syllable, has been a defining moment, not just for me, but for all of Magnolia Creek. It has highlighted fractures we were too content to ignore. Her words carried across the room, binding together the disparate elements of emotion and reason into a coherent tapestry of awareness and accountability. When I stood on the edge of that pool, Jasmine continued, her voice unwavering, I felt the weight of not just one officer's prejudice, but the breadth of a system that had time and again failed others like me. And while I've come to terms with the pain, it has also kindled a fierce resolve in me and my community to demand more. Her testimony transformed from a recounting of victimhood to a call for systemic reformation, and she spoke with the fire of someone unwilling to let constraints define her. Beside her, the community leaned in, sharing her vision reflected in their silent affirmations, each nod a pledge of solidarity and shared purpose. "And now we stand united," Jasmine continued, voice resonating with conviction, committed to transforming this knowledge into sustainable change. It is a story not yet finished, an arc of justice we are all determined to complete, where our voices grow stronger and our humanity recognized. The powerful sincerity of her testimony left an indelible mark, a collective reminder of what was at stake, of the imperative necessity for the systematic changes she fiercely advocated. Her words planted seeds of determination and resilience that reverberated within the hearts of those present. As she stepped down, a chorus of silent support enveloped her, threaded with acknowledgement by those whose lives her journey had profoundly touched. This moment would echo far beyond the courtroom walls. The defense's rebuttal, measured and respectful, sought to frame Brent Salter as a product of systemic failures as well, a narrative striving to balance accountability with potential redemption. Richard Carter's approach was nuanced, aiming to demonstrate Brent's willingness to learn, to reshape in the light of mistakes recognized and understood. In his final address, Brent himself spoke directly, his words colored by introspection. "I acknowledge the wrongs I've done," he confessed, a quiet resolve lacing his tone. "I want to be part of the solution, part of building the trust I damaged within this town that I still call home." His statement marked a pivotal moment where humility met responsibility, inviting the court and community to consider forgiveness within the tapestry of restitution, a difficult yet integral facet of justice encompassing all sides. With deliberations imminent, the jurors absorbed the multifaceted dialogue that had unfolded, a convergence of narratives demanding conscious consideration, hoping to transcend punishment to reach understanding and reparative justice. As proceedings drew to a close that day, Magnolia Creek found itself at a moment of suspension. Caught in the breath before decisive change, feelings woven into the town's identity, vying to redefine unity and forward momentum, Jasmine found herself once more amid supporters and change-makers beyond the courthouse steps. Each encounter a reminder of the journey from darkness into the yearning promise of light. Discussions embarked upon the next phase of advocacy, proposals for new community policies and law enforcement training crafted with intentions of clarity and equity. The reverberations of the courtroom transcended local impact, touching a wider terrain of societal discourse on justice and transformation. Jasmine's testimony became part of a larger tapestry, a narrative encompassing not just personal reclamation, but the enduring pursuit of a collective justice reimagined. This trial, through its manifold truths and trials, encouraged not merely reactive measures, but proactive solutions to entrenched inequalities, each step, revelation, and resolve, paving the way for a future woven with threads of hope, action, and profound systemic renewal. And as dusk again claimed the horizon, Magnolia Creek stood united, resolute in its journey towards a dawn where justice, compassion, and accountability stood triumph, promising a world where healing and progress will through every narrative, empowering voices like Jasmine's to guide the present, shape the future, and redefine the legacies of justice for generations to come. As the courtroom quieted for the final phase of the trial, a palpable anticipation enveloped the atmosphere. A charged silent expectance where justice hung in the balance, ready to be weighed and measured against truth and humanity. The room had become a crucible where testimony, evidence, and raw emotion converged into a singular moment of reckoning. Richard Carter rose with a poised calm, addressing the jury with an earnestness designed to evoke understanding and consideration. His defense of Brent Salter had been an exercise in nuance, underscoring the complexity of accountability in broad strokes while painting a portrait of introspection in finer detail. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carter began, his voice deliberate, We have spent considerable time examining Officer Salter's actions, not to absolve, but to contextualize within the pillars of the systems that have contributed to failings in judgment. As we've discussed, ladies and gentlemen, Carter began, we have spent considerable time examining Officer Salter's actions, not to absolve, but to contextualize. We have spent considerable time examining. He paced slightly, each step a measured cadence reflecting the gravity of the case. Brent acknowledges his mistakes, continued Carter, casting a look toward his client, and has expressed a genuine desire to rectify them through meaningful contribution to this community's efforts for reform. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. What we ask, Carter concluded, is for you to consider the broader implications of your decision today, one that balances justice with the potential for growth and change. Brent's presence, stripped of the uniform that had once signified authority, now exuded a vulnerability, a transparency engendered by remorse and the hope for restitution. Andrea Greenway rose in response, her prosecution characterized by a steadfast commitment to exposing the entrenched failures in both individual and systemic contexts. Her closing argument was articulate and impassioned, speaking directly to the conscience of the jury. This trial, beyond its immediate consequences, Greenway argued, is an opportunity for you as arbiters of justice to reaffirm our community's values, to demand accountability from those who are sworn to protect, and to signal that such actions will not be tolerated. Her gaze swept the jury, then landed with piercing clarity. The choice before you extends beyond Officer Salter. It represents a stand against the historical patterns that have enabled misconduct to be overlooked. Your verdict is a message that compassion and justice can coexist. Greenway's presence was indomitable on that floor. A reminder that justice was not just punitive, but affirmatively transformative, capable of shaping a future reflective of human dignity. With the closing arguments concluded, the jury retreated to deliberate, leaving a vacuum of tension and reflection in the wake of their journey toward decision. The audience, steadfast in their vigil, leaned into whispered reassurances, a community, bonded by shared anticipation, suspense written across faces lined with earnest hope. The thoughts of many returned to the rallying messages spoken by leaders. Those moments when Jasmine Holloway had urged them to envision a society unbound by fear but rich in empathy and understanding. A vision that now tenuously poised itself before the scales of justice. As hours passed and silence punctuated only by the courtroom's procedural hum, Jasmine found herself among companions, all holding their breath, awaiting a verdict that transcended Brent's fate, and spoke to the soul of a community determined to reform itself. Sheriff Holloway, seated beside her, offered a comforting nod, a silent communication steeped in both paternal warmth and the understanding of shared stakes. Together they formed part of the ongoing discourse aiming to reconstruct justice from fractured ideals, their journey a microcosm of efforts set to transform societal bearings. Finally, the jury filed back in their expressions, a mosaic of resolve hardened by the weight of their charge. The room hushed into a tapestry of silence woven through anticipation, breath suspended for the declaration that would shape Morose. Anew the four persons stood, the verdict an historic statement from Magnolia Creek, a path previously obscured now illuminated through acts of courage and justice. On the charge of assault, she announced, her voice resonant with authority, we find the defendant guilty. A collective intake of breath rippled through the room, the decision etching itself into the town's continuum. A milestone denoting accountability strengthened through shared resolve and advocacy. Yet, it was more than a binary decision. It was a call to reinterpret what justice meant, a renewed commitment to recognizing the interdependence in every action and the power in every community to rewrite narratives not in opposition, but in repair. Brent Salter's face registered an acceptance of the verdict, emblematic of an understanding, reached through cyclical reflection. His nod to Jasmine signified an unspoken pledge to contribute to Magnolia Creek's pursuit of true and lasting change. Outside the courthouse, As the early evening light spilt warmly across determined faces, the community gathered, standing vigil to witness the march of progress, followed not with bitterness, but a resolve to continue what had passionately begun. Jasmine approached the steps, joining hands with activists and leaders who reflected the burdens and triumphs they carried collectively. Beneath the broad canopy of magnolia, they stood as avowed harbingers of a dawn tempered well by trial, ready to infuse the coming days with dialogues rooted in equity, honesty, and resilience. As the courthouse doors closed behind them, Magnolia Creek began its next chapter, forged in action, sustained by an enduring promise to weave justice into every fiber of its tapestry, ready to reclaim and write anew the legacies of a future, shaped by many voices, singing in effective harmony. The streets of Magnolia Creek felt different now, charged with a palpable energy reshaped by the verdict and the community's continuing efforts for justice and reform. Conversations in cafes, at bus stops, and on porches were infused with renewed hope, a testament to the power of collective action and the resolve to foster meaningful change that the trial catalyzed. Yet beneath the surface of this newfound unity lay threads of tension, as not everyone saw the verdict as a triumph. Division had quietly crept in, revealing itself in whispered debates and uncertain looks exchanged in passing, a reminder that change, while powerful, was seldom neat or universally embraced. As Jasmine Holloway walked through the town, she reflected on these undercurrents. The courtroom's decision had been a step toward accountability, but it was not without its complications. Brent Salter's conviction was a line drawn in the sand, but for many, it raised questions that had been lingering unspoken beneath the town's polite veneer. She met with Maya Carter at the local coffee shop, their usual haunt now a hub of activism where plans were hatched and dreams took tentative flight. The cozy interior buzzed with the collective hum of determined voices, an orchestra of intent focused on the future. Maya greeted her with a warm smile that belied the seriousness of their ongoing mission. "Jasmine, it feels like we've come a long way, but there's still so much to do." Jasmine nodded, taking a seat opposite her friend. The verdict was a victory of sorts, but it's highlighted the edges where we still have a lot of work. Her voice carried both the weight of responsibility and the courage it had forged in her. Maya leaned closer, her expression one of earnest resolve. "There's been talk about some of the community feeling left out of these discussions. We can't afford to lose momentum or let anyone fall through the cracks." The reminder was timely. "We've created a spark. Now we need to tend to it carefully." Jasmine agreed. "We have to reach out, invite those who feel alienated to the table. It's going to take all of us to keep this movement alive and transformational." Across town in the precinct undergoing transformation, Detective Sarah Green instituted new initiatives designed to bridge the chasm the trial had exposed. Workshops on empathy and diversity alongside forums encouraging open dialogue between officers and residents began to chip away at long-held mistrust. Sheriff Holloway worked tirelessly to implement these changes, determined to ensure that the dialogue of reform did not quieten into a mere echo. He moved from meeting to meeting, advocating for policies that reflected both the lessons learned and the commitments forged from Jasmine's ordeal, pushing the precinct to evolve alongside the community it served. However, as these conversations took root, they also unveiled the complexities of changing a system steeped in tradition. Resistance came not only from within the ranks, but from characters deeply entwined in identities shaped by the shadows of the past. The challenge lay not just in policy, but in hearts needing to open up, to bend rather than break under the imperative transform. Engagement with the youth of Magnolia Creek grew into a formidable network for change, inspired by the trial and motivated to build bridges across generational divides. Inspired by Jasmine's resilience, they organized dialogues and educational events, encouraging active participation and cultivating skills to chart their own courses and advocacy. These efforts reverberated beyond the town borders, influencing nearby communities to self-examine and reevaluate their own relationships with authority and equity. Jasmine's story had become a clarion call, a powerful tale of not only personal survival, but of a town's reawakening to collective responsibility. Now it was the respond the division, while a stumbling block was recognized as a catalyst fuel for the conversations, pushing the community to delve deeper into understanding the values underpinning their vision of justice. Meetings became spaces not only for agreement, but for airing dissent, dissecting fears, and addressing the inequalities that still persisted. As night descended on Magnolia Creek, its citizens gathered for one such meeting, filling the town hall with voices determined to steer their dialogue toward inclusivity and sustainable change. It was an assembly of diversity and unity, a vivid display of the community's commitment to ensure that every soul felt heard, valued, and part of the revolution of hearts and infrastructure underway. Jasmine stood before them, a young woman, transformed by adversity, yet visibly empowered by the belief in collective hope and action. Today, we stand at the confluence of courage and conviction, she began, her spirit lighting up the room. Let's not just dream of change. Let's be the architects of a world that honors each voice, each story, and propels us into a future our children will thank us for. Applause filled the hall, not so much an applause arising from consensus alone, but from the shared acknowledgement that this journey was inclusive, that their voices together could sculpt a future embodying hopes. Resounding echo, a masterful symphony of justice reimagined. Within Magnolia Creek, among desperate lives and intersecting journeys, a tapestry of resilience and understanding emerged, a testament not only to what had been achieved, but what remained to do as voices, once isolated, synchronized in the persistent pursuit of equity and dignity for all. In the quiet thereafter, hearts resolved to channel these efforts toward new horizons, laboring not in solitude, but collaboratively, ready to see the vision through, until every vestige of division transformed into unyielding unity, and every call for justice harmonized into a chorus of profound and enduring truth. A heavy silence cloaked the courtroom as the jury filed back in, each step echoing like a harbinger of fate across the polished wooden floors. Outside, the community pulled together in anticipation, each member carrying the weight of hope and fear intertwined. The day had arrived not simply to deliver a verdict on Brent Salter's actions, but to measure the town's commitment to justice as a collective journey rather than an isolated act. Inside, the air was electric with tension, a charged atmosphere, crackling with the potential energy of moments suspended between decisiveness and uncertainty. Jasmine Holloway sat among her community members, her presence a quiet reminder of resilience and advocacy, pushing through the trial shadow and into the broader realm of systemic revelation. Her heart thudded a persistent rhythm, yet her spirit remained a beacon to those around her. As the foreperson of the jury stood, the room collectively leaned forward, breaths converging. A courtroom, though disparate in perspective, united in anticipation of the same truth. Everything that had been brought to light through evidence and testimony, now centered on this instant, raw, revelatory, and transformative in potential. Before a person began, voice steady, yet infused with the seriousness of their task. On the charge of aggravated assault, we find the defendant Brent Salter guilty. An undercurrent of relief and empathy rippled through the room, not for the conviction itself, but for what it symbolized. Acknowledgement, a step toward accountability. Address stage for broader conversations on healing and reform. Brent's face, once a canvas painted with defensiveness, now wore the vulnerable hues of acceptance and regret, an understanding of wrongs eclipsed by the determination for amends. Magistrates and members of the press hastily recorded the decision, preserving in ink and memory a moment that would resonate far beyond the courthouse walls. This trial had transcended traditional bounds, sparking a discussion on how justice must evolve beyond punitive measures and into realms fostering growth and understanding. As the gavel fell, it sounded not one of finality, but of transition. The proceedings folded toward conclusion, a backdrop preparing for renewal and introspection as journeys toward change evolved around personal promises met with community expectation. Brent Salter, acknowledging the gravity of justice with solemn nod, accepted the dictates that came behind the jury's wisdom, embracing accountability as the harbinger of his path toward redemption. To Jasmine, he offered a whisper of gratitude, not words, but a shared understanding cushioned between acknowledgement and apology through the silence of intent satisfied by consequence willingly borne. Chairmen of local reform and advocacy groups gathered outside, joined hands with community members in a symbolic and intentional unity. Shared commitments resurfaced in conversations rich in complexity, yet executed in tones textured with compassion. In front of the courthouse, Maya Carter addressed the assembled crowd with Jasmine standing resolutely by her side. Familiar anchor points, grounding them amidst the jubilant, yet thoughtful assembly. This verdict is a beginning, Maya ended, projecting her voice over the blended emotions of relief and sober determination. We are writing the first chapters of a story born from pain, but crafted through hope. Under a clear sky, Jasmine spoke next, each word resonating like the indelible beat of a drum. Her voice carried effortlessly over those gathered. Words, riding wings of conviction and vision. This verdict is not an end. It's a signal to each of us that the fight continues and will continue until every voice is validated, every heart respected, and every community thriving in the equity we've begun to sculpt. The crowd erupted in applause, a sonic tapestry rising and mingling with the gentle breezes wrapped in magnolias, memories and promises of purposeful orchestrations, bridging past declarations with future aspirations, unchecked by prejudice and strengthened by collective potential. Within Magnolia Creek, conversations pivoted toward immediacy and tangible change, affordable health care meetings, education reforms, and creating alliances across sectors and societal tapestries aiming toward inclusivity and respect. New partnerships flourished, reaching neighborhoods once cloaked in silence, now resonating with creativity, justice, and egalitarian aspirations. Magnolia Creek, manifested by recent history into a beacon, remained vigilant. A testament to justice sought continuously, progress determined by reflection and driven by renewed advocacy, mingled with everyday realities, boldly met. In whispers of twilight descending upon the town, echoed a commitment to nurture dialogue beyond silence, leaves whispering in currents, that the journey remains tethered to voices intent on reshaping legacies lined with truths shared not in differentiated strides, but aligned within hearts ready to lift together with the verdict as a guiding star. Magnolia Creek stepped confidently into the labyrinth budding legacy where each journey forward uncovered the tapestry knit with every story, every effort merging toward a justice intertwined, resilient, realized, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across Magnolia Creek. The echoes of the verdict continued to reverberate through the town. It was a verdict marking completion of one chapter and the prologue of another, a catalyst igniting new discussions, initiatives, and a commitment to transformative change that extended well beyond courtroom boundaries. Back at the sheriff's office, Sheriff Holloway convened a meeting with his officers, a gathering infused with a sense of renewed purpose. The precinct, much like the town, found itself at a crossroad, a decision point where tradition intersected with progress, pushing them towards a future that demanded honesty and integrity above all else. This isn't just about correcting mistakes. Sheriff Holloway addressed his team, his voice a steady compass guiding them. This is about rebuilding trust, not just with words, but through actions that align with the vision we've all committed to uphold. Detective Sarah Green nodded in agreement, her recent work spearheading initiatives for transparency, laying fertile soil for deeper conversations on bias, empathy, and the role of law enforcement within their community. These efforts reflected a determination to move beyond mere rhetoric, demanding accountability and fostering understanding as key pillars in the department's evolving ethos. This transformation is an opportunity, Sarah interjected, her voice carrying both resolve and invitation. We must embed these values into the fabric of our culture, setting precedents for how every officer interacts with our community, across town, The ripple effects of the trial reached into classrooms, community centers, and living rooms, sparking dialogues where once silence reigned. Educators inspired by Jasmine's perseverance incorporated lessons on social justice and civic responsibility into curricula, encouraging students to become active citizens in their own right. Brianna Madison, a respected teacher at Magnolia Creek High School, saw this as an opportunity to harness the momentum. In her classroom, she fostered discussions that pushed students to question injustices and envision the world they wish to inherit. Your voice matters, she told them. Think of the impact you want to make. Begin designing it today. Meanwhile, Jasmine, buoyed by the positive energy and united vision, set into motion plans to expand the grassroots network she had inadvertently established. Meetings with local leaders turned into brainstorming sessions on community outreach, with concrete strategies for engaging disenfranchised populations in policy discussions and civic life. She collaborated closely with Maya Carter, dreaming up campaigns to harness the engagement that had blossomed during the trial, channeling it into sustained activism that would hold leaders accountable to the promises of equity and reform they now espoused. One of their key initiatives involved creating a community council, an inclusive board designed to ensure that a diversity of voices informed the town's decisions. Jasmine and Maya teamed up with allies across different sectors to build a council, reflective of Magnolia Creek's varied tapestry, a group tasked with navigating complex societal issues with transparency and resilience. That council will be a game-maker, Maya affirmed, her passion undiminished. Will be the living embodiment of what collaboration rooted in respect looks like. It's time to lead with empathy, to govern with the heart as much as with the mind. The community's existing infrastructure was reimagined. Traits of listening and empowerment embraced, not feared. A town marked by transformations that refused silence and celebrated vibrant dialogues, transforming complexity into strength, hurdles into achievements. SIMPS, by the system's design, was responding in response. The palpable shift was felt on the streets, where neighborhood projects burgeoning with spirit began to take shape. Community gardens, public art installations, and outreach events were nested like pearls inside a shell of collaborative foresight, each a testament to a society weaving together in shared purpose. Sheriff Holloway found himself squarely in the center of these initiatives, drawn into dialogues previously evaded, as he continued to champion reform, not only within the law's embrace, but in the shared consciousness pulsing through Magnolia Creek. His boundaries blurred between parent and leader, inspired by Jasmine to pursue justice as a narrative continually reimagined under the gentle glow of street lamps. People gathered, sharing words and weaving narratives. Their intentions manifest reiterations of equitable futures. A tapestry embraced by every step towards progress tinged with quiet resilience. And amidst this transformative tide, Magnolia Creek stood as a town renewed in its promises, a beacon of potential, nestled within the ordinary, while embracing the extraordinary through resolve driven by hearts recognizing the vast horizons yet undone and dreams yet unfulfilled. With empathy as a compass, justice steadfastly intertwined within every action, and integrity sealed upon the town's blueprint, Jasmine and those alongside her embraced the enduring endeavor, rekindling justice not as a destination, but as a journey, nurtured by the truth ingrained within every committed soul, steering toward dawn. In the days that followed, Magnolia Creek loosened the binding constraints of the past, its citizens marching hand in hand towards horizons gleaming with the beckoning promise, a future sculpted, not by towers nor walls, but by the humanity echoing within. Shared legacies of uncovering solidarity ingrained as dreams textured by justice, swayed like choruses resonating within. Magnolia-scented wines heralding the continual birth of communities, rediscovered, renewed, and ready to rise resilient through the trials unyielding into tomorrow. The courtroom's shadows had long since dissipated into the warm embrace of a new day. But for those involved in the trial of Brent Salter, The echoes of history resonated with fresh clarity. This town, once a sleepy canvas of complacency, had painted its horizon with the vibrant hues of change, orchestrating a symphony of reform echoing on every street, whispering through the leaves of ancient magnolia trees. With the verdict rendered, Jasmine Holloway turned from reflection to action, her role now invoking the spirit of guidance and mentorship. The days that unfolded saw her deeply engaged within the community, her voice a harmonizing link drawing disparate elements into cohesive vision. A chorus orchestrated by shared determination, infused with the spirit of perseverance. At the sheriff's office, the tangible shift persisted under the watchful eyes of Sarah Green and Sheriff Holloway, palpable in interactions that embraced transparency as both a shield and a beacon. New policies hard-wrought from the fires of necessity began looping through routines, allowing transparency to render division obsolete, cultivating trust amidst the hallways once shrouded in silence. Sarah stood before a group of fresh recruits, her focus on instilling not just protocol, but empathy, a foundational cornerstone for the future they're tasked to protect. This isn't about wielding authority, she articulated, her voice steady, echoing Jasmine's unwavering grit. It's about engaging with our community, listening, learning, and adapting in ways that are inclusive. Remember that every step forward is a part of building trust and respect. A hand went up. David, a bright young recruit, resonating with idealism and intent. How do we make sure these changes last? He asked, embodying the hope of so many stepping into these better horizons of service. Sarah smiled, the question a testament to the shifting tide. By committing to constant reflection and holding each other accountable, she replied. This isn't an end point, it's a journey. Together, we redefined what it means to serve. Beyond the precinct, Jasmine orchestrated dialogues that wove fabric from the community's diverse threads into unified resilience. Under the guidance of Shay and Maya, initiatives harmonized into concerted actions, forums, workshops, and grassroots projects, their commitment echoing the town's soil with intentions, promise bright and possibility bold. The newly formed Community Council was a resounding success, a microcosm of democracy juxtaposed against Magnolia Creek's embrace of change. Voices once silent found resonance, those unheard rose amidst the gathering chorus, a powerful force for unity, weaving understanding through dialogue parsed between compromise and collaboration. At a community storytelling night organized under a starlit sky tangled with gossamer dreams, Jasmine witnessed the power of narrative history as elders shared tales of resilience intertwining past with present, propelling the shared dreamscape of collective progress. One such storyteller, Mr. Lewis, a respected elder and keeper of Magnolia Creek's vibrant history, stood, his words carrying the wisdom of generations, woven between reflections of time. I've seen many winters and summers, he began, his voice a seasoned thread laced with memory, and throughout them, it takes a certain kind of wine to bring change, change that courses through generations. Y'all right here are that wine, gathered together. You're painting my sunsets with colors I've longed to see. Laughter and cheers engulfed the gathering, innocent singing in harmony with the hope that tomorrow nurtures. Jasmine, amidst this embrace, permitted herself a moment of reflective gratitude, a respite earned through perseverance, yet forged anew within collective determination. As dusk melted into night, citizens and leaders, advocates, and learners found common ground in the heartbeat of this storytelling. They began to draft not another chapter of solitary resilience, but a tome of solidarity entwined with respect, a narrative fiercely written into the charisma underlying reform. The evening's serenity, Sheriff Holloway joined his daughter, both standing side by side beneath the magnolia boughs, whispering aspirations within their intertwined branches, dreams of sustenance beyond adversity, of a tomorrow sculpted by equity. You've changed everything, Jasmine, Holloway spoke softly, eyes reflecting both joy and humility. What you started here, it's history, it's history. Jasmine turned to him, words melding strength with tenderness, We did this together, Dad. All of us, she acknowledged, gesturing to the community, its shining presence mirrored in the stars above, and will keep moving forward always. Against the backdrop of a clear coexistence vision, Magnolia Creek stood not as a relic bound by its struggles, but as an emblem of hope and advocacy transformed. The trial's reverberations, while echoing past decisions, spun into a refreshing pursuit filled with profound lineage. As they partook in witnessing a renewed chapter, collective resolve a harbor, Jasmine, her family, and the town's vibrant kin began carving a path through unyielding valleys. Voices synchronized within the endless orchestrations of justice rising. Anew, in Magnolia Creek, justice became an anthem woven within daily existence. Awakened by hearts entwined with untethered resolve, serving a beacon, ever guiding, a promise, leading them forth into a dawning horizon, embellished with infinite potential yet to be discovered, yet eternal in its luminous resonance. As dusk gracefully wrapped Magnolia Creek in its soft embrace, the town vibrated with a deep sense of accomplishment, each heart beating to the rhythm of change they had forged together. The transformation infused the air, a tangible presence, whispering between the magnolia trees, echoing promises made and dreams yet to be fulfilled. In the Holloway household, a quiet sense of closure mingled with new beginnings. Jasmine found herself leaning against the porch railing, her gaze tracing the familiar curves of her neighborhood under the gentle evening light. The trial had concluded, but her work and that of the community was only just beginning, she thought. Of the council meetings that stretched late into the night, the rallies that brought so many to their feet, and the quiet conversations that redefined bonds strained under the weight of injustice, Magnolia Creek had finally found its voice, and in doing so, had charted a course away from shadows and into the light. As she stood there, her father joined her, a quiet companionship settling between them, marked by shared glances between known paths and newly ventured territories. The silence was soothing, a contrast to the fervor that had characterized their lives in recent weeks. "There's so much more to do," Jasmine mused aloud, her thoughts drifting on the evening breeze. "But we've started something that feels like it has a life of its own." Sheriff Holloway nodded, his pride evident in the crinkles at the corners of his eyes. "You remind me every day of what can happen when courage meets opportunity. We've seen how powerful our community can be when unified." Jasmine smiled softly, the warmth of his words a beacon in the closing day. "It's everyone working together. You, me, Maya, Sarah, this town, it's all of us." As if summoned by their conversation, Sarah Green and Maya Carter appeared at the end of the walk, smiles broadening as they approached. Behind them, more familiar faces, neighbors, friends, leaders, gathered, continuing a tradition of communal support and shared ambition. Drinks were shared, laughter punctuated stories, and the glow of camaraderie washed over the gathering. A town solidifying friendships into an unyielding tapestry. Jasmine, surrounded by the resilience and warmth of her people, felt a profound peace settle into her bones. Maya raised her glass, her voice clear and determined above the murmurs of conversation. "To Magnolia Creek, a town transformed by its people, this is only the beginning." A chorus of cheers erupted, a symphony of agreement that soared into the night sky. It was a pledge of continuation, a vocal acknowledgement of what had been achieved, and what still lay ahead. In that moment, Jasmine knew that they had done more than set a series of actions into motion. They had sparked a flame that would not easily be extinguished. Change wasn't just coming, it was already here, driving every decision, kindling every action with purpose and conviction. As the evening deepened and stories turned into dreams under the stars, the gathering began to disperse, each person returning to their homes, warmed by community and rich in hope for the future clarity they were crafting together. Jasmine lingered on the porch, watching as the last of the lanterns flickered out, and the nocturne descended upon the town. The path ahead was broad and beckoning, illuminated by both the mistakes and achievements of recent months. A journey co-written by every voice determined to inscribe justice in the hearts and minds of those yet to come. A gentle breeze swept through, rustling the leaves and weaving a lullaby that spoke of progress and reconciliation, sweetened by the promise of a new day committed to truth's enduring pursuit. As the world hushed into slumber, Jasmine whispered into the night, "We did this," a testament to resilience and an ode to the future they envisioned together. Her heart was full, eyes lifted to the stars, beseeching them to keep their watchful vigil over Magnolia Creek, a town once divided, now unified in its pursuit of justice, hope, and enduring transformation. And thus, Magnolia Creek, through trials, faith, and lessons learned, stood unwavering on the cusp of dawn, ready and prepared to embrace every unfolding chapter with grace, resolve, and an indomitable spirit that knew no bounds, forever committed to justice reimagined and shared light. Everlasting, was this story crafted well enough to evoke the hope and unity it intends to? And would you care to join Jasmine's ongoing journey by liking, sharing, or subscribing to discover more tales of empowerment and transformation?